We are almost there. And you're good to go. I'll start the recording on your nod.
Okay. I now call the May 26, 2020 remote meeting of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education to order. All board members are participating by simultaneous communication. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll? You're muted. You're good.
Board members, as I call your name, please say present. Board member Rhonda Cheek.
Present.
Board member Dr. Ruby Jones. Board member Carol Sawyer.
Present.
Madam Clerk,
Yes, ma'am.
Board Member Jones was muted, so can you please?
Yes, ma'am. Board member Dr. Ruby Jones.
Present.
Thank you. Board member Margaret Marshall.
Present.
Board member Sean Strain.
Present.
Board member Lenora Shipp.
Present.
Board member Jennifer Delahara.
Present.
Board Vice Chair Thelma Byers Bailey. Not yet. Board Chair Elise Dashew.
Present.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum with 8 members present.
All right. Thank you very much. I will now entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion from Carol Sawyer, a second from Lenora Shipp. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hands and say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Do we have any opposed? So that passes by a vote of 8-0, Madam Clerk. Okay. Is there a motion that the board approve the consent agenda items?
So moved. Second.
So that is a motion from Jennifer De La Hara, a second from Carol Sawyer. Before we move to a vote, does any board member wish to pull any part of this item for individual consideration? All right, hearing none.
Madam Chair,
Oh, yes. Yes.
I would like to pull several of these that just deal with mobiles. So I will go ahead and say M, for instance. I will pull M.
So you're only pulling M.
Well, this is a commentary on all of that.
Okay, but just to be clear for the minutes, you're pulling item M.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so we will vote on the motion minus, or do we have any other items to be pulled? Okay, so we shall vote on the motion minus item M. All in favor? Let's see. Okay, all in favor of everything except for item M, please let it be known by a show of hands and say yes.
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 Do we have any opposed? All right, so that is 8-0. And now, Ms. Marshall, would you like to speak to item M?
Yes, I would like to just speak to, there are a number of these, as you see, installation of mobile classrooms and mobile restrooms. And I'm going to make a comment, and if the superintendent wants to correct or add additional information, I would invite him to do so. It's my understanding that all these mobiles are things we have in other places in the county, and we are moving those around to accommodate needs from one place to the other, and that has to happen this summer. And we provide approval and funding for that to happen. So I'm assuming that the purchase does not include this does not include particularly new mobile classrooms, but existing ones that we have in the system. Am I correct in that, Superintendent Winston?
Yes, Ms. Marshall, we're spending in total about $3.5 million to relocate mobile classrooms and restrooms this summer. And then in addition to that, we're spending about $1 million to refurbish several mobile restrooms and a couple of mobile classrooms, which will in essence give them another 15 years or so of usable life. So yes.
Thank you. Okay, just wanted public to hear that.
All righty. So is there a motion to approve consent item M then?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right. All in favor of the motion by Margaret Marshall with the second by Carol Sawyer, let it be known by raising your hands and saying yes.
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 And that is 8-0. And our consent agenda is approved. And Madam Clerk, it looks as though Ms. Byers-Bailey has now joined us. Just wanted to let the minutes reflect that. All right. Mr. Superintendent, would you like to speak to us about your personnel appointments?
Yes, Madam Chair and members of the board, it is my pleasure to announce 4 personnel changes tonight. And momentarily you will see on your screen those 4 personnel appointments. And these are all principal changes, by the way. If we could move to the next slide, please. So first up is Dr. Carla Mathis, who will become the new principal at Druid Hills Academy. She currently serves as principal of Alcorn Middle School in Columbia, South Carolina. She's also been an assistant principal there, and she is actually not a stranger to Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. When she left the district for another opportunity back in 2015, 2016, she did so for her teaching position at Coolwood Middle School. She's also served as an academic facilitator at West Meck, where she's also been a teacher. She has taught at the Olympic and Chester Middle in Chester, South Carolina. And Dr. Mathis is also a CMS parent. And so I want to take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Mathis back to Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. She is joining us and would ask that if she has any brief remarks, that she takes a moment to share those with us.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Superintendent Winston and the board for this opportunity to join CMS once again. I look forward to leading Druid Hills Academy and adding to the CMS. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mathis. The second is a new principal at Winding Springs Elementary School. And I'm happy to announce that this position will be filled by Catherine Bonacera, who is currently the principal at Allenbrook Elementary, where she has served since 2014. So she'll be joining the home of the Eagles, their mascot. Miss Bonacera served as a new leaders resident principal at Hickory Grove Elementary and was once a teacher at Shamrock Gardens Elementary. Welcome to Winding Springs Elementary, Miss Bonacera, who has also joined us and would like to ask if she wanted to share a few brief remarks with us.
Good evening, Superintendent Winston and board members. It is a great honor to be with you all this evening. I'm humbled by the opportunity to serve the Winding Springs community and am excited to be joining the Eagle family. I look forward to meeting our staff, students, families, and community partners in the coming days and weeks. The relationships we build will serve as an important foundation for the work ahead, And I feel confident that together we will build upon the strong traditions of Winding Springs and create an environment where every student is positioned to successfully navigate this ever-changing world that we're living in these days.
Thank you, Ms. Bonacera.
Thank you.
As a transition to the next appointment, and that will be filled by Penelope Crisp, who will assume the principalship of Matthews Elementary School. Ms. Crisp is currently the proud principal of Lansdowne Elementary, where she has served since 2014. She has also served as a literacy facilitator at In Haven and 2 previous principalships, one at Clear Creek Elementary and the other at Torrance Creek Elementary. She's also been an assistant principal at Torrance Creek and Moorhead, as well as a principal fellow at Windsor Park. I know this move is bittersweet for Ms. Crisp because she previously taught at Lansdowne a number of years ago. So welcome, Ms. Crisp, and we're pleased to have you at Matthews Elementary. I believe she is joining us as well on the Zoom call. Would you like to share a few brief remarks?
Thank you so much, Superintendent Winston and board members. First, I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to my Lansdowne staff, students, and family. I'm so grateful for the time I had with them and so appreciate their support, but I'm really excited to embark on a new opportunity to lead Matthews Elementary. And I would like to thank you all for allowing me to become a leader at this excellent school. I look forward to the relationships that will grow there. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crisp. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to welcome Rachel Korn to Reedy Creek Elementary, where she will serve as the next proud principal of this school. Currently, Ms. Korn serves as the principal at Cochran Collegiate Academy, where she has served since 2013. She's also been a principal at Coolwood Middle and has also served as a learning community curriculum resource teacher in 2 different learning communities. She's also been a teacher at Independence High School here in CMS, as well as in Kannapolis City Schools. I know that Ms. Korn will be a great fit for Reedy Creek Elementary School, and I know she's excited to begin work with the students, the parents, and the faculty at Reedy Creek to take the school to the next level. Ms. Korn is actually joining us on the Zoom call as well, and I would invite her to share a few brief remarks.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Winston. Oh, I guess you can't see my picture, but I am here. Thank you so much for this honor. I look forward to this next exciting adventure. Oh, there I am. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you for your brevity, Ms. Korn. We appreciate you and welcome again.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, that concludes my personnel report.
All right. So next, we're going to move on to a report on student assignment regarding student assignment considerations for Providence Spring Elementary and McKee Road Elementary. I turn to the superintendent for a report on these student assignment considerations.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair and board members. And I am going to ask Ms. Akeisha Craven-Howe to join us and present. But before she does so, I just wanted to take a moment to highlight with our board members and really our viewing public that unlike recent student assignment conversations, the conversation about Providence Spring and McKee Road is not construction related. And by that, I mean that there's no new building or building addition that is planned as part of the 2017 bond. Instead, Providence Spring has actually utilized all of its available space in its facility, and it has also maximized space for mobile units at its campus. McKee Road Elementary has also used all of its available space in the facility. But unlike Providence Spring, McKee Road does have some space for mobile units on campus. And so tonight's report is really sort of a midpoint update. I will not be making a recommendation to the board for a vote during this meeting. And with that, I will hand it over to Ms. Craven Howe.
Thank you, Superintendent Winston. Good evening, board members. It is a pleasure to share with you an update this evening on our conversations regarding a potential boundary change between Providence Spring Elementary and McKee Road Elementary for the purpose of providing relief to Providence Spring. Are you all able to see the presentation?
Yep.
Just for a little bit of context, this has been an ongoing conversation. The need for relief at Providence Spring is a conversation that really surfaced significantly last year during our conversations to establish the boundary at Ray Farms STEAM Academy, which is a K-8 school. The motion that established Ray Farms STEAM Academy did not address the Providence Spring relief, but we did commit to coming back in the 1920 school year to continue that conversation. We restarted the conversation with an initial community engagement session, which was face-to-face in January 16th. We had a March follow-up scheduled, and we had to reschedule that to May 14th, and that was held virtually. It was also recorded, and the video of that webinar engagement session was posted to the CMS planning website. Just to orient the viewing public to the area that we are speaking about, here you see Providence Spring. If you can follow my cursor, this yellow line is the outline of the Providence Spring attendance area, and the school is here. The purple line then is the outline of the McKee Road Elementary attendance area, and the school is here. I will point out that we are using maps for the 2020-21 school year. The reason for that is that there is a boundary change for McKee Road Elementary, which becomes effective in the 2020-21 school year. And so for that reason, we're using a year ahead maps instead of the current year maps. The superintendent alluded to some of these numbers a bit, but I thought it would be helpful for you to see the number of classrooms and the planning capacity, both at McKee Road and Providence Spring, as well as for Crestdale Middle and J.M. Robinson Middle, which are the two middle schools that these schools continue to. You can see McKee Road is right at 102%, using all of the classrooms in their facility. Providence Spring, quite a bit higher at 133%, using all of the classrooms as well as 8 mobiles. Providence Spring does not have room to accommodate additional mobiles. McKee Road has space to accommodate up to 16, and I'll show you a little detail of that in just a moment. You also see, continuing to the right, the 2024 projected enrollment in the attendance area, as well as the 10-year projected enrollment. And I do want to point out that the 10-year numbers are draft. We continue to work with an external partner on both the methodology and assessment of the 10-year enrollment projections, and we hope to be able to finalize those in the next couple of months. Crestdale, when we think about the middle schools, Crestdale Middle School is under 100% and also can accommodate mobiles at its site. J.M. Robinson is over 100% and cannot accommodate mobiles at its site. Each of the scenarios that we'll discuss this evening require the addition of mobile units to McKee Road Elementary. This is an aerial view of the school. The 16 mobiles would be in the form of a 10 classroom modular unit, which would go roughly here on the site. And if we chose to exceed the capacity of that 10 classroom modular, up to 6 additional mobile units could go on this portion of the site. Before I get into the scenarios, I think it's helpful just to always ground the viewing public in the student assignment policy, JCA. It certainly governs the work of my team and me, as well as the superintendent's ultimate recommendation to the board. That policy, JCA, requires that all boundaries are contiguous, that is, an unbroken line drawn around the school. That policy also identifies 4 priorities of the board, each of which is given equal weight in policy. And these 4 are also what we use to assess any scenario that we bring to the public and to the board. In addition to those priorities, the board identifies a number of additional factors that it would also like the superintendent and therefore staff to consider in developing any kind of student assignment recommendation. So I'm going to walk us through 4 scenarios. I do want to acknowledge that the community has seen and had an opportunity to provide feedback on the first 3. The 4th scenario, which is the gray scenario, is a combination of both community input since that May 14th community engagement session, as well as board feedback. We will provide a follow-up engagement opportunity that allows the community to learn more about the gray scenario, ask questions, and provide feedback. I certainly would not expect that anyone who has signed up for this evening's public hearing will have an opportunity to really process the gray scenario and provide any kind of feedback that quickly. Again, just kind of orienting ourselves to the map as we walk through the scenarios. The first scenario is one that we call the blue scenario. It assigns the portion of the Providence Spring attendance area, which continues to J.M. Robinson to McKee Road Elementary. And so if you can follow my cursor, it is this portion of the map, which would be assigned from Providence Spring to McKee Road Elementary. This is the blue scenario. The second scenario is the orange scenario, which assigns the northernmost portion of the Providence Spring attendance area. Again, following my cursor, it is this portion here. It assigns that portion of the Providence Spring attendance area to McKee Road. This is the orange scenario. The yellow scenario, instead of changing a boundary, actually combines the boundaries of the 2 schools and makes McKee Road a K-2 campus and Providence Spring a 3-5 campus, such that students in both attendance areas would ultimately attend each campus at some point during their K-5 career. This is the yellow scenario. The gray scenario, which is the one that the community has not yet seen, attempts to assign the communities which are closest to McKee Road from Providence Spring to McKee Road Elementary. And so it is the portion of the Providence Spring attendance area here, and then here as well. And that is the gray scenario. When we look at these scenarios in comparison to each other, looking at what enrollment would look like for each of the 2 elementary schools, as well as how each of the scenarios compare on the board's 4 priorities in the decision matrix. We look at the blue scenario. It shifts the highest number of students to McKee Road Elementary and would leave the school at about 145% utilization. It reduces the Providence Spring enrollment almost to 100%, so right at 102%, which gives us confidence that Providence Spring then would fit within their current facility. I do want to point out this row here, which is not data that we have presented in prior community engagement sessions on this topic, and that is the McKee Road core space. You may recall a little over a year ago, we made a presentation to the board and presented 3 different ways of looking at utilization in the school. The most common one is the teacher to classroom ratio, which is the one that's represented by this 145%, for example. Another one is looking at the utilization of core space. In this particular example, we're looking at the utilization of the cafeteria. The state of North Carolina recommends 12 square feet per student in the cafeteria. Today, McKee Road is right around 11.5 square feet per student. You can see that for each of these scenarios, that decreases to a low for the blue scenario of 8.26 feet per square feet per student, and a high of 9.65 on the yellow scenario. In terms of the board's priorities, blue is a trade-off between proximity or home to school distance, where you see a negative, and creating an intact feeder pattern. Because at the end of the blue scenario, you would have all of the students who remain in Providence Spring continuing to Crestdale, and all of the students assigned to McKee Road continuing to J.M. Robinson. The utilization, positively, there is relief provided to Providence Spring, but we do increase the utilization at McKee Road. On the orange scenario, you can see the comparison there. It moves fewer students, and so McKee Road increases to 135%, and Providence Spring decreases to 109%, which may require a mobile or two, but certainly not the 8 mobiles that they currently have. The students that are assigned to McKee Road in the orange scenario currently continue to Crestdale. So left unchanged, that would create a split feed to middle school out of McKee Road Elementary. You see the numbers here for the yellow scenario. Here, there's very little relief provided to Providence Spring. The reason for that is our 4th and 5th grade cohorts are larger than our younger grade cohorts at both schools. And Providence Spring, as a 2-story facility, we would be required to use that facility for the upper grades. So there's very little relief provided to Providence Spring here. Finally, in the gray scenario, it moves the least amount of students to McKee Road at right around 160 students for a utilization of 134%, Providence Spring at 111. Again, like the orange scenario, the students that are proposed to be assigned to McKee in the gray scenario currently continue to Crestdale Middle School. And so left unchanged, that too would create a split feed to middle school at McKee Road. As part of the community engagement, we were able to receive questions in the chat box as well as feedback. We also administered a survey where we were able to get additional feedback. And so what you see here are just some of the trends and things that we heard about each of the scenarios. In the blue scenario, a lot of the response was that proximity to school, so that home to school distance to the elementary school was valued over an intact feed to middle school. In the orange scenario, we got feedback around splitting a neighborhood within an HOA and the preference for not doing that. There was also some concern that a relatively small cohort of students would feed Crestdale from McKee, and that they would really go on to middle school without a large number of students with whom they've had a relationship with and have attended elementary school with. There were also some traffic concerns with the orange scenario. On the yellow scenario, there were lots of concerns about disruption to the K-5 experience and not being able to have a trade-off with ample relief for that disruption, as well as difficulty for families who may have a child in kindergarten and a child in 4th grade, and they would have to span both of those campuses at once. Again, for the gray scenario, the community has not yet had an opportunity to weigh in, but I would add that similar to the orange scenario, we would have a small cohort of students, again, that would feed Crestdale from McKee. There were also some general concerns raised in the feedback that were not specific to any of the scenarios. A concern for shifting the overcrowding from Providence Spring to McKee Road. Concern that none of the scenarios represents a long-term solution. And some wonderings around why we were not considering McAlpine Elementary for relief. I will say that school, though at 91% utilization, that translates into about 3 more classrooms than they currently have teachers. And so like McKee Road, we would be looking at adding mobiles at McAlpine Elementary. And it is further away from Providence Spring than is McKee Road, which is just about 2 miles away. A little bit more about the survey. As of 2:30 this afternoon, there were just over 1,350 responses. 88% of those responses, or 1,172, identified as attending Providence Spring. I will offer here that current enrollment at Providence Spring is 961. So certainly we either have households that have taken the survey more than once or families outside of those who currently attend Providence Spring who are taking the survey. 77 of the survey respondents identified as attending McKee Road, and then 86 identified as attending a school other than Providence Spring or McKee. We asked, one of the questions that was asked in the survey was to rank the 3 scenarios. And so what you see below in the table is the rate at which each of the respondent groups rated each scenario as their first choice. So among Providence Spring respondents, for example, just under 79% rated blue as their first choice. For McKee respondents, that was just under 42%. And among those who said they attended a school other than Providence Spring or McKee, it was right at 84%. Based on the assessment of relief and the trade-off, as well as very low appeal among those who took the survey, we will eliminate the yellow scenario from consideration at this point. So as we continue our conversation, we are looking at the blue, orange, and gray scenarios. In terms of next steps, we will offer a recorded webinar along with a follow-up survey and an opportunity to submit questions. We will distribute that link via the school principals. The intent is to do so early the week of June 1st. We will also then, once we are able to collect the questions, provide a transcript of questions and answers, which will also be posted to the website then the following week. For now, we are scheduled for a final public hearing and board vote during the June 23rd board meeting. And with that, I conclude my update and turn it back to the superintendent or the board chair.
Thank you, Ms. Craven-Howell. I will turn it back over to Madam Chair.
All right, do we have any questions or discussion, board members? We're not voting tonight, but anything that you feel needs to be brought up or clarified? Mr. Strain.
I got the mute, thanks. So appreciate the update, Ms. Craven-Howell. I have a couple of questions. One is there is a community proposal that's been brought forward that has started to gain quite a bit of traction in the community, which has the same sort of moderate relief provided to Providence Spring and less impact at the middle school level than you've presented with regards to the Gray plan. So I'm wondering where that fits in terms of additional thinking that has been provided by the community to the board, to yourselves in planning, and how we go about considering other proposals that actually deliver the same sort of relief but don't introduce the same type of issues that we're discussing that you presented around the middle school feeder.
So thank you for your question. Typically, we would discuss those with the superintendent as well as with individual or small groups of board members. And if it is the desire of both the superintendent and board members to add those scenarios to the slate, then we can do so and introduce those publicly to the community for feedback.
Okay, so understand the process. At what point or what's the timeline for taking these back out to the community and actually performing another cycle of community engagement that you outlined?
So for the 3 that we have remaining, blue, orange, and the addition of gray, the intent is to record a community engagement session, provide that link to principals to distribute the week of June 1st, so early next week, and that would be accompanied by both a survey and a form to submit questions. And then we would provide a transcript of those questions and answers soon after receiving them.
Okay, so there's another proposal that we're aware of that again is gaining a good amount of traction in the community. How do we go about getting that heard as well?
So, Ms. Craven-Howell, if I could chime in here, what I would like to be able to do, Mr. Strain, is to be able to have that conversation with Ms. Craven-Howell about the intricacies of that particular proposal. I don't know a whole lot about it as it was first mentioned tonight. So I'd like to be able to have some dialogue with her about the specifics of that, and then we can determine next steps. But certainly if we do decide to incorporate that, we would want to get community feedback on that option as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to support that in any way. It makes a lot of sense from the metrics that we're looking at in terms of the decision matrix. And so I'd really appreciate having that conversation with yourself and briefing you on that, Mr. Superintendent. With regards to the further community engagement, it sounds like it's a community presentation. Did you mean it's a community presentation? You're presenting to the community, or will there be an engagement session?
So thank you for the clarification. It would be a presentation. So for the May 14th webinar, it was live with some slight interruptions, and participants were able to submit questions in the chat box. I was able to answer a few of those live, but the vast majority of those were answered in a written format via a transcript, which was later posted. So given that and how that worked, my proposal was for the next one to record it and provide the link to the recording, and still the opportunity for viewers to submit questions, and still the follow-up in a written format, which would be posted on the website.
Okay. Appreciate that. I mean, I think we're in a difficult scenario here with regards to the COVID crisis, the ability to hold proper community engagement and face-to-face meetings. But I do think we have an opportunity on a decision like this to continue the proper engagement. And so I'd certainly appreciate the consideration there. I do have a question in terms of the split feeder. You mentioned a couple of the scenarios include a split feeder, introduce a split feeder, and some of the challenges there are the numbers of students that would be matriculating from McKee through to Crestdale if we didn't change the middle school feeders. I know that you shared the JM figures for last year or this school year that we're currently in. Obviously, there is a significant change next year as well. So I think it's important for the board and the community to understand what that looks like for next year, because it's really that new attendance zone, the new enrollment figures that we need to be looking at. And I think you shared earlier in the presentation this year's, which obviously changes substantially next year. With regards to that, can you walk us through, I think you characterize them as concerns about a small number of students in that split feeder. What numbers are you looking at there, Ms. Craven-Howell, and so that everybody is working with the same information in terms of the numbers of students that we would be separating from their classmates in these scenarios.
So let me start with the J.M. Robinson numbers, and then we'll talk about the numbers in the split feed. So for J.M. Robinson, next year, so the beginning of the 2020-21 school year, we have year one of a 3-year process to implement a boundary change. So we have a group of students who will be assigned to Ray Farms that would have typically been assigned to J.M. Robinson, and then a group of students who will be assigned to J.M. Robinson who would have typically been assigned to Community House. We are starting with just the 6th grade and then 7th and then 8th, which is why it'll take 3 years. Enrollment projections for next year for J.M. Robinson are 1,210 students. Just today, I checked to see how many students are actually registered, and it's 1,252. I anticipate where we will actually start next school year, it's probably somewhere in between those two numbers. So that's the enrollment at J.M. Robinson. In terms of the orange and gray scenario, I've not calculated the number of middle school students for the orange, and I will do that, but I have calculated it for the gray. In general, what we see is a drop-off in the number of middle school students in many of these neighborhoods compared to the number of elementary. So in the gray scenario, we assign approximately 160 students from Providence Spring to McKee. In those same neighborhoods, there are 32 students that attend Crestdale for middle school.
Okay, and I know there's some information on one of the other scenarios that we'll discuss with the superintendent. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, any other questions or comments? Ms. Marshall.
Okay, just a few points. I just wanted to make some general comments based on the sort of the 3 or 4 points I saw that folks generally had put up that really weren't applicable to a blue, orange, or yellow at this point. And just a comment on those. And I think that we certainly are concerned about overburdening McKee with a number of students, but I think this goes to sort of something we have to think about between short-term and long-term options. And we need to be looking at long-term options, but we know in the short term that we can't put any more students at Providence Springs. So we're going to have to figure out something to do, because this is part of certainly growing, or just certainly where that school is at the moment. And then with class size requirements that our General Assembly has put into place, we have to be cognizant of that. So while I've been getting some emails that talk about why can't we just sort of let everybody stay where they are until we come up with a longer term solution, while I appreciate that, I don't think that that is an option. So I think that we are going to have to realize that and think accordingly. Also, the introduction of McAlpine would be, is something to think about. Again, we're going to have to put mobiles there, I think, in order to accommodate it. And then that also puts us into the situation of introducing another high school feed. Not that these students would be matriculated to a different high school, but I think the fact that we have kind of kept everything in the Providence High School boundaries while this is all going on is preferable. So I would personally probably not entertain looking at McAlpine just for those reasons. I think minimizing feeds while we know we have one at Providence Spring already, but minimizing anything like that going forward into a high school feeder pattern, I think is important to consider. So I just wanted to give that the community a little feedback in terms of what I've been getting and hearing, and just to sort of give my 2 cents in where we are at that point. But again, not overburdening McKee, but certainly we have to do something to reduce the number of students at Providence Spring. And that's all I have.
Okay, Ms. Byers-Bailey. There you go.
There I go. I appreciate the presentation regarding the yellow scenario, because that seems to be an optimum situation for a lot of school pairings. It just doesn't happen to work for this particular school pairing. But it's in theory, I think it's a great model for us to always consider. And I'm glad that it was presented and we saw what the results were and why it's no longer being considered. So I appreciate that analysis being presented.
Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you for that report. We do have more work to do. These decisions are always complicated, and it's always quite the puzzle to find the solution that serves the greatest number of children. All right, colleagues, we have one public hearing tonight on these student assignment considerations for Providence Spring Elementary and McKee Road Elementary. And in this public hearing, the rules are as follows. Each speaker will be called in to speak one at a time. Each speaker will have a maximum of 2 minutes to address the board, and a group will have a combined time of 7 minutes. Each speaker may only talk about the topic that is the subject of the public hearing. Individual student matters or specific personnel matters may not be discussed. Personal attacks will not be allowed. Profanity or other inappropriate language will not be allowed. And the board reserves the right to cut off or, in this electronic setting, mute any speaker who violates these rules. And with that, please allow the first speaker in, and that would be Shirin Autry Vandekar. I hope I've pronounced that right.
Madam Chair, I don't have Shirin on the meeting right now. Oh,
Sorry?
no, pardon me, I found Shirin.
Okay, great. And then following Shirin, just so that the next speakers are ready, the second one will be Megan Swedberg and the third will be Bob Hayes. So Shirin, go right ahead.
Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yep.
How this works. Okay. I'm speaking as the current advocacy chair for Providence Spring. I believe that an appropriate solution for relief has not been presented at this point, nor has adequate community input occurred. As we are all aware, the current healthcare crisis has forced us to meet in an unconventional platform. The survey may have been an attempt to assist with this, but I think it has caused much turmoil in the community, and the results are unreliable for a variety of reasons, from multiple people taking them and other issues with this survey, which is why I'm weary of another one coming out. I'm aware the board is attempting to continue with business as usual. However, effective community engagement is imperative in a decision like this. Providence Spring has not been given the opportunity to work together as a community and with McKee Elementary to come up with an acceptable solution. Both viable scenarios that we have been presented with previously, orange and blue, not discussing yellow, overwhelm McKee, merely shifting the problem, resulting in yet another redistricting scenario we're afraid of, such as the one we are currently facing. In addition, neither option adheres to CMS board policies if we look at proximity and breaking up neighborhoods. For these reasons, we are asking that additional options which have been presented to the board from community members at both schools be explored, and that we are given the opportunity to work together as a community rather than torn apart by two unfavorable options, meaning the orange and the blue, as we have the gray before. I also want to take this opportunity to reiterate the need for a residency audit. This is supported by all members of the Providence Spring community, and many families have inquired as to why this has not been taken as a first step before moving families around and creating instability. Given the time it will take to do an audit, we're asking to give us more time to have more engagement sessions and more time and delay this decision. Thank you for giving us the chance to speak tonight.
All right, thank you very much. So next we have Megan Swedberg, followed by Bob Hayes, and then Ashley Fian. Ms. Swedberg, looks like you're with us.
Hi, okay. As the incoming PTA president for PSC, I would like to urge the board, like Sharon said, to take a step back. As a school community, we do not feel that the right solution lies with orange or blue, and are asking that the vote be delayed until August so we can better explore other options. We are confident that there are better solutions out there that would support not only our community at PSE, but our neighbors at McKee as well. We are seeking a solution that would enforce CMS school assignment policies. The right decision would keep neighborhoods together, encourage walkability, and take into consideration feeder patterns, as well as considering equal utilization at both schools. The options that are currently presented, we haven't seen gray, have divided our school community during this time, and we need to be working together. I would like to stress that we should be extending grace and kindness during this time to each other as we are working together to find the best solution. Just asking that you please give PSC and McKee communities some time to work together to find the best option available for our schools. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Hayes, followed by Ashley Fian and then Nicole Russo. Mr. Hayes?
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
We hear you.
Okay, good. I'm the president of Providence Plantation Homeowners Association, and as such, I'm a representative for 1,500 homeowners in the Providence Spring area. It's come to my attention that somebody is questioning whether Providence Plantation is a single neighborhood or rather an informal collection of smaller neighborhoods. And I'm here to testify to the fact that Providence Plantation is and always has been a single neighborhood. It has clearly defined borders and a single HOA which represents all the residents. The HOA takes care of community business and also sponsors numerous social activities for which all are invited to attend. The residents of Providence Plantation clearly self-identify as members of a single neighborhood. Our children socialize together, and we believe it's extremely important that they be allowed to experience their education together. We strongly support the CMS policy of keeping neighborhoods together in school assignments, and we ask that you maintain that policy in this matter. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. So next we have Ashley Fian. I see you are with us.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name's Ashley Fiam. I am a committee member of the Providence Plantation HOA board. I also have 3 young children who will be coming through the PSE school system beginning in 2022. As Bob Hayes just pointed out, we are one congruent HOA neighborhood. And obviously, as the HOA board, we believe our children shouldn't be split into different elementary schools, specifically kids across the street from each other, like the Orange Plan intends to do. We would just like to keep the best interest of our children in mind, including the continuity of elementary school, feeder patterns, and relationships that they create within their community. In addition to keeping our neighborhood together, our neighborhood is getting ready to undergo some large construction changes that directly impact these school decisions. The new 485 interchange will be beginning potentially in the fall of 2020, and will have an interchange that ends directly across from Plantation Road. This has been of grave concern for our HOA. We have been trying to work with the city to increase safety on Plantation Road, which currently has no sidewalks. However, the city has informed us that their intention is to make Plantation Road a cut-through road. We've had no promise of speed bumps or any other increased safety or security. The Orange Plan, now that yellow is out, would place an increased number of children and buses through this area, with children waiting for school buses at different times. And just so everyone's aware, a child was recently hit on that road. Lastly, although the Orange Plan appears to decrease school to home proximity, with these new road and construction changes, the decreased mileage will be negligible due to the increased traffic, specifically with the Plantation Road interchange. In addition, the Providence Plantation children already travel 7 to 10 miles for middle school. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. So next we have Nicole Russo, followed by Deepti Chitay.
My name's Nicole Russo. I'm a member of the Providence Plantation HOA board, as well as a Providence Spring parent. I have a first grader, a rising kindergartner, and a 2-year-old that will be attending Providence Spring sooner than we know it. We are grateful that the overcrowding issue is being addressed and appreciate the ability to be heard. I will be speaking on behalf of the Providence Plantation neighborhood. We all love Providence Spring and realize our school is experiencing severe growing pains. As a result, special classrooms have been removed and the student-teacher ratios are climbing. All of this diminishes the quality of the Providence Spring learning environment. After reviewing the guiding principles used to develop a student assignment plan created by the school board, the orange scenario is clearly less favorable. With the distance between Providence Spring and McKee being about a mile, we feel the board's emphasis should be placed on simplifying feeder patterns and keeping neighborhoods together. By focusing on these principles, not only will the goals be met, but they'll be met with the least disruption as the children move through the education system. It's also imperative with the site constraints of Providence Spring that adequate relief is achieved now so that we aren't facing the same issues in 10 years. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So next we have Deepti Chitay, and I hope that I've pronounced your name right, and please let me know if I haven't. And you're on, there you go.
Can you hear me right?
Yes.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Deepti Chitay, and I'm a resident of Central Park community, referred as Area 10 on the map here. So while I agree with the speakers before me on taking more time and exploring more options before coming to a decision, but I still strongly favor orange scenario. And why? I would start by comparing blue and orange. So proximity to the school, Central Park from PSC, my community from PSC is approximately a mile, while McKee Road is 1.5 miles or a little over. So that kind of beats the purpose of proximity to the school if we go with blue scenario. And we also have to consider the traffic, the morning rush hour traffic as well. Next is, in fact, feeder pattern. So I understand the orange scenario creates a new split feed at McKee, but it shouldn't be a huge concern because PSC has already been splitting between Crestdale and JM. And to the earlier speaker, to her point that there will be very few students in Crestdale from McKee. It's the same situation with PSC students. My daughter has very few friends from her elementary school to JM. And my next point would be utilization. If you compare the suggested utilization rate change between the two scenarios, although the blue scenario reduces the rate of utilization by 38% at PSC, but it also increases the same by 47% in McKee. So which essentially means in some time we would be discussing the same issue of overcrowding for McKee, which proves that the blue scenario does not check off the sustainable option box. And speaking of my community, the total count of students that go to PSC currently are 8, literally. So keeping 5-year projections in context, even if each house sends at least one student to PSC from Central Park, there can only reach up to 42 students max. So comparing this number to current enrollment at PSC, which is around 961 or so, it is practically a negligible number. So my request to all the board members is to take the decision by keeping in consideration. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next we have Lindsay Korich, followed by Ivana Campbell. There you go.
Oh, sorry. Hi. So my name is Lindsay Karish. I'm a Berkeley resident, and I'm the parent of a rising kindergartner and a 3-year-old who will also be affected by these decisions. I wanted to be a part of the voice that was in support of an audit of the current enrollment of PSC. after going through the registration process myself, I've understood that the only time that one has to prove their residency for the school district is on this initial enrollment, which means that there could be several students that are attending PSE that are no longer living in the school zone. If we overlook counting these people and reappropriating them to their home school, that would be an oversight when the numbers are actually mattering quite a bit for these two schools. I also wanted to express my concern with scenario blue with regard to the utilization rate at McKee Road Elementary. The utilization rate skyrockets to 149% at McKee Road. And I'm afraid this is going to be detrimental to McKee Road Elementary. It will overburden the school. The students and the teachers will be affected. I'm talking to teachers at McKee Road Elementary that already expressed concerns with current space issues with their current enrollment. Makes me worry about overburdening the school even more. There are other scenarios, even the gray scenario that we all have not been able to process very much today, that can provide some kind of compromise between some of the problems that scenario blue and scenario orange have presented. So there are other options that provide more equitable relief while maintaining positive home to school ratios. So I just encourage the board to investigate that further. And I also thank you for the time to speak tonight.
Thank you. So next we have Ivana Campbell, followed by Julie Jensen, and then Kim Anslow. Ms. Campbell? Oh, you're muted, ma'am. There you go.
Hi, I'm Ivana Campbell, and I'm a Providence Spring Elementary parent and also a Berkeley resident. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and I want to start by thanking Superintendent Winston and the board members for really all the work that has inspired in the last couple of months in keeping all our students safe and engaged during this really challenging public health crisis that we're all facing together. I equally appreciate Ms. Craven-Howes and CMS Planning's effort in presenting options to alleviate overcrowding at Providence Spring Elementary. As we look at the scenarios that are presented, I really just want to touch upon a few items worth considering before making a final decision, rather than talking about one scenario versus, against the other. Number one is really thinking about decreasing, or at the very least, maintaining home to school distance for all impacted students, not increasing it. Proximity to school is really a crucial value for many families, and the loss of walkability has profound impact on the affected communities. Number two, I want the board to think about, choosing a scenario that increases McKee utilization without overextending it. I know this has been mentioned before, but we really should strive for a balance in utilization between McKee and PSC, so we don't create, potential issue down the road for McKee. Number three, if we're thinking about feeder patterns, I know it's a very hot topic on the parent boards and on every social media board imaginable regarding the situation. We have to remember that PSC is one of several South Charlotte elementary schools that feed into 2 middle schools. So really creating a split feed at McKee is okay as long as there's an analysis done regarding the impacted cohort. Number four is one that I really want to talk about. We need to encourage communities to collaborate more as opposed to competing aggressively for their most immediate desired outcome. As the survey results indicated, some households, took more than one survey, took liberty with a survey, and it really brings into question, what are we doing here in terms of, viability of these resorts? Our behavior as community members, as board members, and as parents in how we approach these student boundary conversations really has an enduring effect on all of us. So, our kids play together on the same PTA. Our kids are watching how we behave. So we really should strive and be, positive role model going through these.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Sorry, that was 2 minutes. Okay, next we have Julie Jensen, followed by Kim Anslow.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm a Berkeley resident. I have 5 kiddos. Their ages range from 15 to 3. I guess I'm an old parent, or maybe seasoned might be a better word. We've only been in Charlotte for 5 years. And when my older boys were in elementary school in the eastern part of the state, the district decided that I guess they needed more to do, and they redistricted us about every 3 to 4 years. So my boys were bounced from school to school twice. And it really affected them and our family as a whole. I've seen the effects when schools do not have a long range plan, and it makes it hard for the kids to develop relationships with their peers and teachers. It builds a sense of instability for the parents, and it weakens a child's overall school experience. When we moved to Charlotte, our main criteria was proximity to school. We wanted to ensure that our other children would not be bounced from school to school every few years. Living in Berkeley, we thought that it would be ensured that we would, with having our elementary school right outside of our front entrance, and then our middle school outside the back entrance, we felt pretty confident in that decision. And once you've been through redistricting once, you really want to try to avoid it. I have really serious concerns about the options on the table. Specifically, the overcrowding issue is not resolved by either scenario, which I think all the speakers have spoken to this point. It is essentially moving the crowding from PSC to McKee. And given that, I believe we will be having this conversation again in the years to come, which would then possibly require our neighborhood to be moved again. Neither option provides a long-term, stable, or sustainable solution, which 10 to 16 mobile units at McKee is one illustration of that. I would like to ask the board to consider just two things. One, to conduct a residency audit at PSC before shifting.
Thank you, ma'am. That is 2 minutes, but I would welcome you and also Ms. Campbell, if she's still listening, to email us with the rest of your comments that you were not able to share today. So I'm really sorry to cut you off, but I have to be fair and do 2 minutes for everybody. Ms. Anslow, you're up next. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, there we go.
There you go.
I'm Kim, and I'm the proud parent of 2 children at McKee Road Elementary. And I know that South Charlotte is growing and the schools are struggling to keep up with the growth. And I understand that managing this and pleasing everybody is quite a challenge. But I also want to make sure that McKee's voice is heard, because we're the smaller school and all of these options are going to impact us the most. These options, including the gray that was presented this evening, all make McKee more overcrowded than PSE currently is. And yes, that does include the gray that was presented tonight. And there's a few other things I'd like to address about McKee. Our facility is over 30 years old. Our cafeteria is tiny and it's very hot. And then you go to the classroom and it's freezing. We can barely manage with the students that we have now. Thought of overwhelming the school and the bathrooms and the support staff areas is just, it's a challenge for us. Also, the thought of putting 10 trailers on our property plus more for staff is going to really overwhelm us. I know that McKee used to have a lot of trailers, and I've spoken with staff that used to be at McKee when we had all those trailers, and they said it was a huge stress on the facility and the kids. And then also the growth. As we saw from the growth pattern, McKee is supposed to grow and PSC is supposed to decline. So I'm not sure why we were trying to overwhelm McKee when PSC's numbers are declining for the 10-year growth. I respectfully ask that we reconsider the options. I know that there have been some community options and some that Sean spoke about tonight. And please, can we give this more time for the community? And maybe can we have some time when the world is a little bit more back to normal? Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, Madam Clerk, were there any public hearing statements relating to Providence Spring Elementary and McKee Road Elementary student assignment that were sent to us via email?
Madam Chair, we received no emails regarding Providence Springs Elementary and McKee Road Elementary.
Okay, so thank you. Hearing that, I now declare this public hearing closed. All right, colleagues, we have 2 action items tonight. The first is to recommend approval of the to revise the 2020-2021 academic calendar. So that is the calendar for the school year that we're about to go into. But before the board acts, I'm going to turn to the superintendent to introduce this item and to make his recommendation to the board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had to make sure I was off of mute first before I began speaking. Yes, so as board members are aware, and as our viewing public may be aware, on May 4th, the governor signed into law the COVID-19 Recovery Act, which required that all K-12 schools in North Carolina begin on August the 17th. And so even though the board previously approved this calendar some time ago, we are bringing this calendar back so that it is in alignment with the August 17th date. And so we had a small group, a small team who worked on this calendar effort for this upcoming year. And I would just like to highlight them momentarily. We'll have Stephanie McKinney, who is our regular calendar committee co-chair. She was a part of the group and she'll be presenting tonight, possibly with feedback from others. But joining Stephanie on that committee was Latarja Henry, Charles Jeter, Matt Hayes, Kathy Elling, and Monica Adamian. And so with that, I am going to toss it over to Ms. McKinney. I think you're still on mute, Stephanie.
All right, thank you, Superintendent Winston. So can we project the revised 2021 calendar so that it can be seen, please? Thank you. So as Superintendent Winston mentioned, we were mandated to change our start of school date. So you will see that the school starts students on August 17th. August 6th is the first work day that teachers will be back in the building. Also, as part of the Recovery Act, we are required, all K-12s are required to have 5 remote learning days. And you will see those remote learning days August 24th through the 28th. Those remote learning days will be similar to what our students and teachers are experiencing right now with being in a virtual environment. Then you'll see that the quarter will end for first quarter in October. Second quarter will end December 21st, which is before the school goes on winter break. Exams will also come before winter break as well. School will resume for students on January 5th to start that second semester. Teachers will, of course, have a work day on the 4th because they would have to get ready after the quarter ended on the 21st to get ready for that new semester and report cards and whatnot. Then if you also would notice on the 21st, I'm sorry, May 28th will be the last day of school for students, and the last day for teachers will be on June the 2nd. The holidays and the annual leave days, for the most part, was held constant with our current approved 2021 calendar. So all of the holidays and annual leave days are the same for the most part. So the only thing that really moved around was work days and the actual start of school. And also what's different in this calendar is that school will be over for first semester before winter breaks. And that's a big change that we were able to satisfy with this calendar. Does anyone have any questions about calendar 2021?
Board members, and I do not, the way we have this on the screen, Nicole, if you could put it back to, if you could stop sharing your screen so I can see all the board members. Thank you. Now I can tell if anybody has any questions. Well, then I'll go first. First, I just want to say, while this is one of those big abrupt changes brought to us by coronavirus, and mandated by the state, we have spent many years advocating for an earlier start so that our students can take their first semester final exams before the winter break, they're at a real academic disadvantage when they have to take their finals after the winter break. And so I guess you could say that's a silver lining to this change. I also wanted to speak to the RNC because there's just so much in the air in the news right now about the RNC. Originally, our original calendar had us starting school after the RNC would wrap up. But this calendar allows us to start school on the date that Raleigh has told us we have to start, and continue and have schooling at home during the week that the RNC will likely be here. And as I said, there's a lot in the news about whether they will be or whether they won't be, but we need to be prepared and have our kids learning from home in the event that they are, which is the current plan. Do we have any more questions? There, I see you, Ms. Cheek.
I'm not going to be the person talking during mute so that I don't have to be reminded. The topic of the year is unmute yourself. Having spent several years advocating for us to start school earlier, I know there's a lot of people that are fussing right now. I'm sure there's people at this moment that are thinking that they've got vacations planned for that time. Things have changed so drastically, but I do think that this is the right thing to do and for us to move forward with this schedule as it is. You know, we've got our remote learning plan in place. I hope that people see this as an indication of snow days or other things that may come up in our future where we don't have to take days. We do have options to do remote learning in the future for other things. So I do like the way that we're doing this, but as someone who has advocated for us to start school earlier so that we can finish by the winter break, I think this is a good thing. And I will note also that most of our large colleges other than UNC Charlotte, most of the UNC colleges in the state have chosen to start earlier as well. So this is not an uncommon scenario that most families are facing.
Anybody else? Ms. Sawyer, and then I see Ms. De La Hara.
I just want to clarify that the start date is mandated by the state, as are the 5 remote learning days. But it's also my understanding that we don't have the flexibility right now to offer other remote learning days. Is that still the case? So that we don't have the flexibility that we might need should we have a hurricane or an ice storm or any other, or a viral outbreak. We have no flexibility at this moment. We need the state to step up and give us that flexibility to in order to do virtual learning during those times or remote learning.
I didn't mean to imply that we had that. I just meant that this gave us some precedent to say that it is a possibility.
For clarity.
Okay, sorry. Who's did Ms. McKinney? Did you want to respond to that?
I was saying for clarity, in the COVID Act, it does allow, if we have another outbreak, that we might have to learn from home. That's included in there. But to your point, Ms. Sawyer, we just can't say at will, just for whatever reason that we can do remote learning. But if we have, but in that statute, it does talk about, if there's extenuating circumstances that online learning could happen.
All right, I saw Ms. De La Hara, and then I see Mr. Schul, and then Ms. Marshall.
And so the legislation mandated that we have 5 remote learning days. With this current calendar, we are choosing to put those for the week during the RNC. If for some reason it is canceled, or the RNC I'm referring to, or shortened in length or something like that, we could still theoretically come back and take another vote to move the remote learning days around. We have the ability to move those around as long as we just maintain the 5. I just want to clarify that.
And we have to have a plan. So we have to have a remote learning plan as well. That is due to the state, I think, July 1. So we would just need to be cognizant of that. Would assume that remote learning plan to the state would have to be changed too.
Okay.
Because the remote learning plan kind of tells us like how we're going to use those days, when are we going to use those days.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Shul and then Ms. Marshall.
This question isn't explicitly calendar related, so maybe the superintendent can provide some clarity here. So if we have these 5 remote learning days, would the normal expectations for gradings that we have now apply there, or would we have some new guidance, or how would that work for grading?
For grading, so what we'll do, Gabe, great question, as part of our remote learning plan, which is still being formulated, that will certainly be a part of the remote learning plan that we have to submit to the state. I think it's true thinking based on what you just shared that it would be similar, but we'll be able to outline that in the plan, and we'll come back and share that with the board once we have that wrapped up.
Okay, and then would that also mean that we would continue serving school lunches as we have been now?
Yes, so that would certainly be an expectation that I have, that we continue to do that. We know that even though, as what we've found out over the past several months, is that even though students may not be in a brick and mortar building, they still have needs that we have to meet. So logistically, we'll just have to figure that out and make sure that that's communicated widely. But yes, that would be an expectation that we continue to provide meals.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Marshall.
If you look at the calendar, and Ms. McKinney, you can correct me if I'm wrong, please do if I'm wrong. These are more days that we are going to school than we had previously set in the old calendar. So I know staff is wondering, well, will I get compensated for that? And I think that those appropriations will be coming from the state. So I'm certainly assuming that. And so be watching, because legislation will have to accompany this to talk about the appropriation for that, and so staff will be paid for that period of time.
And for clarity, Ms. Marshall, a calendar has to include 215 paid days for staff, and the calendar that we're presenting includes that 215 days. So even though they told us we had to add 5 more days, we are adding those to our calendar. Now, what is going to be in place of is the superintendent's ability to waive during this school year. So we had to build the days in, and we can't go past June 11th, of course, but we also can't go past 215 days. So we just have to just know that going into this calendar. We'll have early release days that will be announced later after this calendar is approved. And then, but it just takes out the ability for the superintendent to waive, but it builds in those 5 days that we're supposed to in order, but the total number still is 215. They didn't increase us to 220 days in the school calendar.
Good clarification. Anybody else? No? All right. So is there a motion to approve the modifications to the 2020-2021 academic calendar as recommended by the superintendent?
I motion that we make the recommendation as approved by the superintendent.
All right, so we have a motion from Ms. Shipp, a second from Ms. Cheek. All right, Shipp and Cheek. Do we have any more discussion? All right, so Madam Clerk, will you go ahead and please call for the vote?
Yes, Madam Chair. And before I call for the vote, I ask our board members to please unmute yourself. Okay. Board Member Rhonda Cheek, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Dr. Ruby Jones, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Carol Sawyer, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Margaret Marshall, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Sean Strain, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Lenora Shipp, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Jennifer Delahara, how say you?
Yes.
Board Vice Chair Thelma Byers Bailey, how say you?
Yes.
Board Chair Elise Dashew, how say you?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes by a vote of 9-0.
All right, thank you very much. And I have a statement to share before we move on to the next action item. So we have just now voted to change the calendar for the upcoming school year, 2020 to 2021, in order to comply with the new state law that requires us to start school on August 17th. And this calendar change was brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. So now we know when the new school year will start. And as far as what school will look like when we start back up in August, we are fielding a lot of questions from many of our constituents about that. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that tonight. These past few months have taught us that there is really nothing quite like learning and teaching in person with the human interaction of being physically present in a classroom together. Sometimes you don't fully appreciate something until you've lost it. And I know many teachers and students are eager to get back into the classroom together. Parents have a newfound respect for the skillful jobs that our teachers do. And they're eager to get their kids, hand their kids back over to the classrooms. And employers are eager to get their employees back into the workforce, which for many involves being able to send kids to school. And yet there are an avalanche of questions and concerns as to how to resume traditional learning and teaching in the classroom while being careful about the health and safety of staff and students and families. How do we accomplish safe social distancing in our buses and in our classrooms and in our hallways? The superintendent and his team are evaluating a variety of scenarios for what school might look like in the coming year. We have more questions than answers, and as soon as we know more, we'll share more. And I know that is becoming a familiar refrain. There's a lot of misinformation and conflicting information swirling around on social media about what is and isn't safe with the coronavirus and with what school might look like in the fall. So I would just ask that we all, our constituents and ourselves, please be mindful before we share anything to make sure that it is accurate for schools in North Carolina and specifically for CMS. Along with CMS, school districts across the country and indeed across the globe are evaluating a variety of scenarios for how to safely resume school and how to adapt schools for possible future waves of the pandemic. There are many different models for distance learning and different ways to combine distance learning with learning in a physical classroom. And many of you, our constituents, are starting to send us lots of ideas via emails and phone calls and Facebook to weigh in with your feedback and on the pros and the cons of all these different models that you're hearing about. Please know that in order for us to do anything much different than the traditional pre-pandemic approach to school, we're going to need the state legislature to allow us to be flexible. We're working to make sure that the state level policymakers understand circumstances that are unique to CMS, such as the intense level of crowding and the large numbers of students in many of our schools. So we will need flexibility from Raleigh to be able to resume school in a way that does not compromise the health and safety of our community. And we look forward to partnering on that with the community and with all of the policymakers in Raleigh who have so much responsibility right now. So we are all family here in CMS. And please know that every conversation we have is guided by finding a way to teach our students well, all of our students, while keeping our families safe until the coronavirus has abated. And with that, we're going to move on to the second item, action item, which is going to be a recommendation for approval of the 2021-2022 academic calendar. So that's a calendar a year out, not this coming year, but the year after. Once again, before the board acts, I turn to the superintendent to introduce this item and to make his recommendation to the board.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. Stephanie will not go too far. She's going to remain with us, but she'll be joined by Damon Willis. Both of them are co-chairs of the calendar committee, and I know that Ms. De La Hara is the Board of Education's representative on the calendar committee. So what Stephanie and Damon will do is provide an overview of the calendar process, share information about the survey results, and then hand it over to me to share my recommendation to the board. And then we'll end with Stephanie. And so with that, I'm going to toss it over to Ms. McKinney or Mr. Willis.
Thank you, Superintendent. So as you stated, we're just going to do a quick recap of the process. If you would go to slide number 2 in our deck, please. Thank you. Last time we were with you, we talked about our process. So what I want you just to focus on this time is just that last box. We're bringing you the superintendent's recommendation today. We're gonna do a quick recap of where we've been and what the results were, and then how we're coming to our recommendation for the superintendent today. And I'm gonna turn it over to Damon.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next slide, please. As we mentioned in the last board meeting, the Academic Calendar Committee is comprised of a cross-functional team that developed 8 different options. Via vote, we narrowed those options down to option A and option B that you see before you. So I'll briefly go over the similarities and differences of each option. So as you can see, both have 177 instructional days, but the start date for option A is Monday, August 23rd, and option B start date is August 25th, which is a Wednesday. The end of the first semester and the third quarter are both the same for each option, but spring break is different. So for option A, spring break begins April 11th through the 15th. And for option B, it's a week later, April 18th through the 22nd. After arriving at these 2 options, we then created a survey to share with our stakeholders in order to garner feedback. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we had a great response from our stakeholders, which consisted of parents, employees, students, and community members as well, who ultimately arrived at option A. Next slide, please. Now, in regards to the reasoning behind choosing a specific option, the reasons were very similar, whether it was the length and timing of spring break or the start date for the beginning of school. But one key takeaway from this slide is that although collectively our stakeholders chose option A, our students actually preferred option B. Next slide, please. And now I'll turn it over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Damon. So after we had conversations with our stakeholder groups, after we looked at the survey results, then the smaller steering committee, calendar committee portion, developed a hybrid option, which we're calling option C. And option C holds all of the critical elements of option A, but also it integrated some of the conversations that we had from our stakeholders. So it required us to make 2 adjustments. So the thinking of the CMS stakeholders was that they preferred the start of school date on the 25th, which was a Wednesday start date. So in order to make that happen, we moved 2 work days to the beginning of the school year. So we took the work day that was originally on 9/17 and moved it to 8/23. And we moved the work day that was on 11/1 and moved it to 8/24. So those were the 2 small changes that we had to make in order to accommodate the thinking of the CMS stakeholder group in collaboration with that's what the community's desire was in option A. Next slide, please. And so just as a visual, the only difference between option A and option C is that the school starts on the 25th opposed to the 23rd. And those two work days that I mentioned just a minute ago are in different locations on that map and our calendar. And can someone project what calendar C looks like in this completed state? Okay, so now,
Nicole, can you make that bigger than 42% for us old people?
okay. And so, so those are the two shifts that we implemented in order to, like I said, make that start date happen. Does anybody have any questions about that, those shifts?
I see Ms. De La Hara, and then I see Ms. Cheek, and I must admit I don't see and then Ms. Marshall. Those are the three hands I see so far. Ms. De La Hara?
Thank you. I just want to clarify, because I don't have the actual calendar option A. So I was unable to see, but are we saying that originally on option A, both September 16th and September 17th were work days, and now you've just taken off only the 17th and moved it over to either the 23rd or 24th?
That is correct.
Okay, I just want to clarify because I had misunderstood that. And I didn't realize they were back to back before. And then I also want to clarify with this change, we have an end of a quarter with no teacher work days right after the end of the quarter, no time for teacher conferences after the first quarter.
That's what the November 2nd will represent. In the original option A, November 1st and 2nd were work days. Actually, the 2nd is election day. So that was going to be a work day anyway with no, because we use some of our facilities for voting purposes. So we was adding November 1st as a work day as well. But in this model, the thinking of the group was that the days were needed at the beginning of the school year. And so to keep the instructional days at 177, it was just having to shift the work days within the that we had already set aside to make that satisfy that request.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Cheek and then Ms. Marshall.
Yeah, so my question was, knowing that kids need a break and teachers need a break, I wanted to make sure that there was still teacher work days built in. I'm guessing that the reason the 16th is still a day and the 17th was removed is because of a religious holiday.
That is correct.
And then in October, there is no days off. Is that correct?
I can't see that. Can you scoot back up some? Yeah, that is correct.
So they are going to go from being off the 6th for Labor Day, having a 4-day week the next time, and then they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 straight weeks without a break. And that does trouble me a bit, knowing the way that kids come into the school year needing, it's just an adjustment. And so that is that's a long stretch that concerns me a good bit. We've already got obviously a lot of time off. November 2nd, is that an election day?
It is.
Okay, and I know the 11th is a mandatory. We have to be off Veterans Day. It just, this really concerns me with that 6-week stretch of no time off. That those teachers are going to be pulling their hair out.
Yes, I can see how that could be a negative connotation for this calendar format. However, there's also other months in previous calendars where there's been a stretch of 6 weeks without a time off anyway, for teachers as well. But in this model, we try to protect instructional time. And in option A that was approved by the public, it didn't have any time off in October either.
Yeah, it just had that, it had a longer, it was the 2-day buffered stretches, the 2 days off and then 6 weeks and then 2 days off to kind of recover. So I understand the concerns. I'm just not real cozy with it. And I'm thankful that I don't have a child that's going to be in school that year, honestly. It's a tough one.
All right, Ms. Marshall?
Okay, here we go. Thank you. I appreciate the fact that this is such a big giant puzzle, and I'm going to make this comment that's specific to the calendar, and then just a comment in general that I think folks need to kind of understand as we walk through this. I think that option A had Monday, November the 1st as a work day, as well as election day on the 2nd. And we've gotten lots of feedback over the year, and I completely agree that we need to keep election day as a work day or as a day when students are not in school for safety reasons, voting reasons, all kinds of things. But this has taken that work day off of the 1st, and this is coming on the day after Halloween, where I know many community members would like to not have to send kids to school that day, although we don't obviously not everybody celebrates Halloween in the same way, and it's not the be all end all, but I do think it's something to consider. And again, trade-offs are kind of what happens here. It looks to me that we have taken that day and put it at the beginning of the year versus using it on the 1st. Was that the reasoning here? Can you speak to that on the removal of the workday on November the 1st?
Yes, so when we took the calendar to exec staff in its current state as option A was approved or voted upon in the public, then we was looking at where could we move or find work days to satisfy the start of school on a Wednesday opposed to starting it on the 23rd. And then we was looking across the calendar. The 17th and the 1st were the two places that made the most sense to move those work days up to the beginning of the school year. The 1st in this original state, yes, the 1st and the 2nd would have been those two work days that could have been used for parent-teacher conference for the elementary schools, also finishing up the quarter, closing out, starting a new quarter on the 3rd. However, removing that workday on November 1st and just keeping the workday on the 2nd can still satisfy that same goal. Now, is it going to be more of a challenge to try to work those elementary conferences into one day? It could be, but there's been other years where we've had the same thing. That's only had one day after the end of the quarter.
I guess the other option would be to start school on the 24th versus the 1st, and I don't have staff input. I would really like to have that before, so that does concern me a bit. I'm going to mull that over as we talk. My colleagues may have some other responses to that. But kind of one other thing I do want to echo in terms of what Ms. Dashew or Chairwoman Dashew just said a minute ago. I would really like to start school earlier and end earlier, and to sort of mirror the calendar that we just voted on. So I think the public is going to say, why did you vote? Why is school starting so much earlier this year? And then sort of back to the same old next year when you seem to accomplished a lot of your goals. And that's just because the environment that we're in, we have a lot of prescriptive statutes around calendar. And so that comes from our legislature. And that's one of the reasons that we have been advocating for flexibility with our state legislators, with the state board, and frankly, anybody will listen as we keep going through all of this, because I think it would suit many of our goals to start earlier. And that's not to say that that we aren't successful with a lot of initiatives that we advocate for, but we are one of 115 districts in this state, and we partner with those districts and our legislature to to do all this incredible work in educating our students. And so we're continuing to do that in terms of calendar, in terms of COVID flexibility, how we deal with lots of things. But I think it's really going to be important as we go forward to have parents and educators and community members understand that we can't unilaterally just decree some things to happen and they happen. We have to have approval from the state in order to do that, and obviously funding from the state to do that. So I really do want to encourage parents and educators, if you've got a concern, to go ahead and let our state legislators know, our state board know, because they need to hear too what you're thinking. Obviously we're passing this along, but your voice really does carry. And I think it's real important that is out there in the public. And so it's really important now more than ever for folks in Raleigh to hear what you have to say about this. And when we are able to get some more flexibility on how to conduct some of these matters, I think it really adds up to a real positive for folks here and for folks all over the state to do what they need to do as well. So I would encourage you to let folks in Raleigh know what you're thinking. Thank you.
All right. Nicole, could you put us all, so I can just see, okay, there. I want to make sure I don't miss anybody who wants to speak, and I couldn't see everybody before. So Ms. Shipp.
Right. I kind of wanted to echo too, actually being in the school and understanding the importance as an administrator to get the first of the school year started. It's good to have those work days at the beginning, but it is crucial, I think, to have those work days as we get into the end of first quarter. That is an important time too, as Ms. Cheeks mentioned too. It is very hard to go that stretch of time, and then you need to assess and get ready to get quarter grades, report cards done, parent-teacher conferences, and I even throw in Halloween. I've seen it all. And it's going to be difficult. Yes, the calendar has been different in different years, but a better calendar when you really think about the needs, and especially, of course, I think it was said at the elementary level, that is a critical need. And you also have pre-K programs that start slightly later already than your K-5 if you're looking at elementary. So I would concur that we really need to think about that in our calendar from year to year. And I think, as Ms. Marshall was saying too, starting earlier this year, talking about 2021, and then going back to a later start date is going to be interesting to say, we were able to do it this year, but here we are going kind of backwards in the next year. And it really is a good calendar when you can put in those days that make a difference for academics and also instruction.
Thank you. Mr. Strain, did I see your hand? I wasn't sure. No, I didn't. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Now I see your hand.
I'll go ahead. Yeah, I just want to reiterate that we've got an opportunity next year to prove what we have long been advocating for, which is what we were given was a mandate that we had to start on the 17th. What we've ended up with is an aligned calendar such that we can finish second quarter and first semester prior to winter break. We've long been advocating for that. That's one of the key things. Certainly Ms. Marshall was talking about as well, that we were going to drive with that calendar flexibility. And so I look forward to leaning in on that as we move forward with subsequent calendars as well, and going to the Senate and saying, look, we've got, this is the case that we're making. We've proven it in a year. That's the benefit to our students. And those are the individuals as well as staff that suffer by having to come back from winter break and then be in a wind sprint toward the end of the semester. And so I look forward to continuing to beat that drum, if you will, that we need that calendar flexibility, and hopefully we'll not only implement it next year, but we will receive the flexibility such that we'll have a subsequent conversation about this calendar that we're discussing now and the ability to align it with the winter break.
All right. Anybody else before we vote? Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Who was that?
Yes, can we go back to slide number 7 so I can turn it over to the superintendent, please?
Oh, yes, sure.
And I'll turn it to the superintendent to make his recommendation.
Okay.
Slide number 7. Slide number 7.
I think it's the one with the 3 different calendar options. AB, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kelly. And thank you, Ms. McKinney and Mr. Willis. As both our co-presenters shared, my recommendation is a combination. It takes the best of option A, which was preferred by nearly 60% of the respondents to the survey. And it does take some items from option B as well to create a hybrid option C. The only significant difference between option A and option C is that option C starts school 2 days later. And so I just want to reiterate that option C is the one that I am recommending for approval for the 2021-2022 school year. And with that, I'll toss it back over to Ms. McKinney to wrap us up.
Okay, so if you could go to that last slide, number 8, next steps. So after the board votes pending, we get a vote of approval, the steering committee will begin to create the supplemental calendars in for 21-22, and then we'll be reconvening in early 2021 to develop calendar for 22-23 academic school year. So with that, I'll turn it back to the chair lady.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the superintendent's recommended calendar for 2021-2022? Ms. Sawyer?
I recommend that we approve the superintendent's recommended calendar, which is C.
Okay. So we have a motion from Ms. Sawyer, a second from Ms. Byers-Bailey. Ms. Sawyer, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, I think we have had a robust discussion. I hope that by the time this year rolls around, the legislature will have granted us flexibility to produce a calendar that better serves our students. But in the meantime, we have to abide by the state law and have a calendar that fits within those boundaries.
All right. Any further discussion before we move to the vote? Okay, I see Ms. Marshall and Ms. Cheek.
I feel like this is what Ms. Sawyer said was exactly appropriate, in that this is not my favorite way to go about this, but we don't have a lot of choice right now, and we need to go ahead and get something on the books and as a placeholder, but we will keep pushing to start earlier and if we can accommodate some changes. But I think that we have a statutory responsibility to do a calendar. This is the best we know how to do at this time, and this fits within our statutory regulations. So that's what we'll do. That's how I will vote.
Ms. Cheek?
Thank you. I was planning to abstain because I do want to acknowledge that the state legislature needs to acquiesce to our needs of meeting the students' needs the best way. I will go ahead, as Ms. Marshall said, and support this, knowing that we have to statutorily have a calendar approved, but that does not eliminate my commitment to lobbying them starting tomorrow to give us flexibility for 21-22 and come back and adjust this if we get that flexibility. So I want to say that to me, this does not mean that we're going to continue to ask for it. So we do it this school year, and then hopefully we can do it in the future since they have let us. So I will go along with this tonight, but I do not think that this is the end of this calendar discussion on 21-22.
All right. Ms. Shipp, did I see your hand?
Yes, I want to agree with that, exactly what Ms. Chika said. And I feel the same way, that I was thinking almost to abstain too, because I really feel strongly about what it looks like now. But given we can fight through this and, work with the legislators, and like you say, we have to go with a calendar, I will be able to go. But I do feel we do need to continue to fight for what we feel is right in terms of our calendar for our students and our staffs.
All right, anybody else? Okay, Madam Clerk, would you please call for the vote?
Yes. And before I call for the vote, I ask that all board members please unmute your computer. Thank you. Board Member Rhonda Cheek, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Dr. Ruby Jones, how say you?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Board Member Carol Sawyer, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Margaret Marshall, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Sean Strain, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Lenora Shipp, how say you?
You need to come off mute, Lenore.
Yes.
Thank you. Board Member Jennifer Delahara, how say you?
Yes.
Board Vice Chair Thelma Byers Bailey, how say you?
Yes.
Board Chair Elise Dashew, how say you?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes by a vote of 9-0.
All right, thank you very much. Next, we have a very important management oversight report on learning and teaching, which is our core business. So I turn to the superintendent for this report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to echo what you said, that this is a very important management oversight report. The team will share information about how we are going about trying to improve outcomes for all kids. And so I think you all are going to enjoy this presentation. And I will also say that this is the first of 3 parts, 3 presentations that you all will receive, 3 consecutive presentations from the academics team. So you might get a little bit tired of seeing Dr. Hayes, but if you don't mind, we're going to start tonight with part 1. And I'm going to toss it over to Dr. Hayes. And this presentation will be shared by a couple of members. And I think Mr. Kingsley has a guest as well that I think he'll get to a little bit later in the presentation. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to you, Dr. Hayes.
Thank you, Superintendent Winston, and good evening, board. take this opportunity this evening. We will share with you the Learning and Teaching Management Oversight Report. Please slide to the next slide, please. This is, as Superintendent Winston indicated, this is the first of 3 presentations that will take place over the next 3 board meetings. This evening in the academic service, you will hear from academics lead, our Chief Academic Officer, Brian Kingsley. Following at the next board meeting, you will hear from our Kathy Elling, who's in charge of our Office of School Performance. And then we will round that out with our Equity and Accountability, which is led by Dr. Frank Barnes. We also have on the academic services side of the house, we also have strategy management, which is Angie Bartles. At the beginning of the school year, we started to look at 3 documents, which we call the TRIO documents here in CMS. And the focus for all of us in academics was to bring them to reality with coherence in all 3 levels, elementary, middle, and high school. In these documents, you see the first document, which is titled as What Matters Most. This is our 2024 strategic plan. This evening, you're going to hear about how we are focusing on our strategy 1, which is focus on the core, which is directly tying in our teacher, student, and content in the core of what we do in the business in which we serve. The second document is a CMS way, focus on what we believe in our theory of action. And then you also have the third document, which is We Are Ready, which is the college and career readiness for after graduation. And these are the expectations we hope that all of our students will leave CMS with as they graduate from our high schools and move into productive citizens inside of our communities. The culture of this is a shared focus with students continuously at the center to make sure that we're building that coherence in all of the departments on the academic side. At this point in time, I'm going to turn the rest of the presentation over to Brian Kingsley, who's our Chief Academic Officer, and also Beth Thompson, who's our Assistant Superintendent of Academics.
Thanks, Dr. Hayes. I'm grateful to be co-piloting this evening with Dr. Beth Thompson, our Assistant Superintendent for Learning and Teaching, but I also have a special guest that I would love to introduce to the board and our superintendent. I'm joined today by Miss Jonna Hawk, who is a 5th grade teacher at Devonshire Elementary. She has been assigned to work with me during our district's Aspiring Leaders program. And I'm incredibly grateful that she's a high potential teacher that has been identified in our district. And she's in search of an executive level career in our school system. And one of the culminating activities of her year-long program is that she will have an opportunity to work with myself as well as the team for a 7-week summer fellowship. So Jonna, I want to welcome you to this evening's Board of Education meeting. And I also want to just say thank you to Wells Fargo, who has continued to provide financial sponsorship for this incredible program that I've benefited from as the CAO over the last 2 years. As Dr. Hayes eloquently alluded to the beginning of this work, not just through our foundational documents, but at the release of our strategic plan just over 2 years ago, it was very timely as what also was released roughly around the same time through one of our district partners, national partners, TNTP, which stands for the New Teacher Project, was they happened to do a study across the country in 5 diverse school systems, very similar to Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. And they released a report called the Opportunity Myth. And that opportunity myth, really kind of the basis of that is it somewhat dispelled the myth that sometimes we tell our kids that if you simply do everything that your teacher asks you to do every single day, that there's going to be an opportunity waiting for you post-graduation. We recognize that that's not always the case for all students, and sometimes it's disproportionately not the case for our students of color. Through their research study, not just in the 5 districts that they studied, but we actually brought TNTP into Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools at the origin of our strategic plan, and they found key levers that when they were in place, these did work for all students. At the center of our learning and teaching, at the center of our classrooms, the center of our schools each and every day must be grade appropriate assignments with strong instruction, and we have a strong, talented workforce. But over the last decade, we have changed standards, we have changed expectations for students, we have changed expectations for teachers without always resourcing them appropriately, which puts the grade appropriate assignments sometimes in jeopardy. We also know, as I've had an opportunity to collaborate with many of you, that deep engagement in what they're learning for our students really matters. Dr. Jones would like to refer to that as the productive struggle that's really required for students to do the heavy lifting and the heavy thinking, for us to believe and have high expectations of our students, and to allow failure to be a part of the learning process and not to be held punitively through our grading process. Teachers who hold high expectations get the most out of our students. We had an opportunity in the same year that that research study was released for TNTP in partnership with the learning and teaching team to visit 25 of our schools across the district, which was a representative sample of our school system, both through the lens of diversity and the various types of schools by level, magnet, non-magnet. And these were key findings, key headlines that were a takeaway from that report that came out at the origin of our strategic plan. While our students are consistently engaged in content and tasks of the lessons, our kids are working really hard as a result of what our teachers are asking them to do. But unfortunately, many of our tasks are unaligned to the demands of our grade level standards. As I shared with you in my opening, when we changed grade level expectations across the state, and for the most part across this country just over a decade ago, it was also unfortunately timed with a great recession. And those expectations were never necessarily resourced with new curriculum and new high quality resources. Another key headline was as CMS teachers used a wide range of materials in their instruction. In essence, actually, many of them were spending upwards of 7 to 10 hours per week trying to identify high quality materials on their own, which was taking away from their ability to differentiate their instruction for their students. The result of that was that students were having inconsistent and inequitable access to grade level standards, not just school to school, but the actual level of materials and the types of materials students may be interacting with may be different in the same grade level within the same school. CMS teachers, as a final headline, also reported inconsistent experiences with curriculum guidance and support from central office at the time, leading teachers to spend significant proportion of their planning time gathering, creating, and adapting materials. The charge of our strategic plan, the charge of our work moving forward doesn't only impact teachers and create a great charge for people like myself in the position as CAO and members of my team like Beth Thompson as the assistant superintendent, but it also has a direct impact on students. When teachers have inconsistent experiences with materials and have opportunities to have to identify what those things look like on their own, how that plays out in our classrooms each and every year, in some instances could be like this. This is the 2019 third grade reading proficiency scores across subgroups. As you can see, we are not performing equally across all of our subgroups. And we also, what we've learned over time is that these third grade reading proficiency scores in many instances are a key determining factor for us to predict the types of opportunities that may be available to children post-graduation. They're not set in stone, but it creates great clarity in our charge that our strategy in our district moving forward doesn't just need to address the next 9 years of these children's lives post third grade, but it has to have a deep intentional focus on what happens from birth through grade 3, so we can ensure that they have the literacy skills that are required to be independent thinkers, independent employees, independent and active learners in our community. How this plays out, and this I want to just remind you, this is a different cohort of students. This is last year's 2019 graduating class across subgroups. The percentage of graduates is represented in the blue bar. And as you can see, we're quite proud of the number and the percentage of students that were graduating. But what we can also see by the green bars that represent those same subgroups is the percentage of students that are graduating college and career ready, that are able to collaborate deeply, think critically. And these are data points that are defined by our state, but they're sometimes key indicators of the type of success many of our students will experience post-graduation. And this is our clear charge that we must address these gaps in opportunity, in access, in great teaching and great learning experiences immediately. And we do that in several different ways, but it's mostly importantly that we do this in partnership with our teachers who are working really hard by provisioning them the materials that are necessary to do the job that we've been asking them to do for a long period of time. I'm very proud to report out to you is that during this school year, the 2019-2020 school year, we began to unveil and implement the highest quality curriculum on the market in English language arts, and in mathematics across all of our levels of schools. We did it intentionally with specific grade bands to ensure that our financial investment in curriculum was not simply about providing materials to teachers and saying good luck, but it was also paired with high quality professional learning experiences for both our teachers, our instructional support staff, as well as our principals and central office staff, knowing this was an area and opportunity for change. And during this current year, we implemented new English language arts curriculum in grades K through 3 in our elementary schools. We did provision and support new math curriculum across all of our elementary schools. And we took a slower, more methodical approach to learn from our experiences in our middle school by implementing in only one grade band, thinking of this as a 3-year strategy of beginning to implement new curriculum in other corresponding grade bands. While we have been studying these key cohorts intently, it's also readying the stage for what future and current supports look like at our high schools by revising and reframing some of our district created supports and math instruction at the high school level, and in service of the new standards that have been tweaked and changes regarding course progressions for our high school standards. We want to ensure that we're continuing to provide new guidance that meet the needs of those standards revisions, but we do have intentions 2 years from now around beginning to implement new high school math curriculum during the 2021-2022 school year. Next year will be a year 0 to begin to understand how we begin framing and readying ourselves for that change for our Math 1. But I'm very excited in these changing economic conditions as a result of this pandemic. This district remains committed to not just high quality content, but most importantly, high quality investments in its people by expanding the curriculum investments and the professional learning opportunities to all of our teachers and students and families in grades 4 and 5 next year. We will also move to begin onboarding new teachers that come to our district in mathematics at the elementary school level. And we will be fully expanding our ELA implementation at the middle school level to all grades 7 and 8, and begin to think about this a little bit more slowly. Then we'll talk a little bit more about that later tonight around going from grade 8, scaling down to grade 7, and beginning to have several schools begin to have full implementation with all 3 grade levels around middle school math. So really, really proud to explain and share with you all this exciting news that we've been able to set the conditions for a very successful implementation. But again, as I shared earlier, this is not just about things and resources. This is about ensuring that we are leading with our people first and making sure that we're leading with all exceptionalities, all differences, and honoring those needs by providing them strong core instruction as their best example of first instruction with their teachers and students. So continuing to go deeper around these services, resources, and how they show up for all of our students, especially our English language learners, our exceptional children that are experiencing this curriculum through different magnet themes across the district, IB, Montessori, dual language, as well as to how this curriculum continues to support and enhance the curricular experience and learning experience for our TD and advanced studies students and teachers. And then through the course of this year, as we were continuing to refine this strategy, like you, we all recognize that our lives as educators, as members of our community, began to slowly change, actually quite rapidly changed on March 13th. But what I'm incredibly proud, another thing that I'm incredibly proud to share with you this evening, is that what held true in terms of the research, in terms of the high effect levers that we can pull to get the most out of our students with the most about our teachers, what mattered then still matters today, and it's high quality instruction. And in order to do that, we're going to continue to need to work together in new and meaningful ways. As Dr. Hayes alluded to earlier, our theory of action is our way of work. That if we do these things together, then incredible outcomes can happen for students. But what makes this district special is that these particular theories of action across stakeholder groups do not happen in a top-down or a bottom-up manner. They have to happen with all of us working in a parallel fashion, working together in unison, and by talking to each other, listening to each other. And when we recognize inequities exist, redressing those inequities by resourcing those problems and fixing the infrastructures that generate them. What you see on the screen here is a list of some trend data that we've identified by surveying our teachers and our school-based leaders over the course of the year around the different types of professional development that have been available to them as a result of our high-quality curriculum investment. The message was pretty clear. Our teachers were incredibly appreciative and grateful for the supports, but they really want us to take a very large system and make it feel small. There's nothing more powerful for them when they have the opportunity to better understand not just what the curriculum is, but how it shows up in their professional learning communities when they're teaming as a grade level or by department. They also wanted a kind of a variety of learning around and with people who are fellow peers in other schools, both across the district, but also within their learning community, as that made the district at some instances feel very small. They wanted us and challenged us to think about various formats that sometimes face-to-face PD is appropriate. Sometimes we need to leverage technology. No, there's not a better time to actually be thinking about those different modalities and formats for high quality professional learning and investing in our people than right now today, as we begin to reimagine what school looks like tomorrow. Our teachers were very clear again on just not thinking about the what of the curriculum, to how they internalize what it is that we purchased on their behalf, but to begin to understand and have coaches working with them as a direct service delivery model to ensure that we're helping them with the how and ensuring that these instructional practices begin to show up in meaningful ways in their classroom. They also want us to have opportunities where we're providing them various methods and approaches to process information in multiple ways, because as they teach their students through the lens of differentiated instruction, they're holding us to the same standard, and appropriately so, for how they receive their own learning. I strongly believe with this incredible team that we have in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools and our entire academic services department, because we have created strong structures for feedback, and because we are privileged to have layers of stakeholder support, we are now poised, incredibly poised, to make incredible shifts that are responsive to those who are closest to the work. I'm going to turn it over to Beth Thompson, who is going to speak to a couple key levers that we are going to implement over the year ahead regarding our learning and teaching strategy. Beth?
Good evening. Our schools have been so generous with their feedback regarding implementation this year in our current model. And on this slide, you can see that within our current model, in places, we have a ratio of district support specialists that, for example, the elementary math level would be 1 specialist to over 60 schools. Or at the middle grades level, in both literacy and math, 1 district specialist to 46 schools. Our schools have appropriately said we need and want more support to be able to implement our curriculum well and to be able to ensure that we're delivering high quality instruction on a daily basis. So without adding additional dollars, but with redirecting dollars, we've been able to increase the number of specialists who will be able to support both our elementary and middle schools in curriculum implementation across literacy and math. We've been able to do this by redirecting dollars that have been used toward funding external vendors who have done a wonderful job in getting us started this year, to being able to build a sustainability model for next year and years to come around our ability to provide adult learning and support to our schools. We know that change in teacher practice occurs when teachers are able to learn, namely in a way that allows them to take that knowledge and apply it to the context in which they teach. There is no shortage of information, knowledge, and skills that our teachers need in order to deliver high quality instruction. Those are listed on this slide. Namely, understanding the mirror work that they need to do, as we all do, around acknowledging the influence of race, bias, power, and equity on the work that we do. And also acknowledging that at no time greater than now do we need to be skilled in being able to do each of these things in order to help support our students in any areas of unfinished learning that could have taken place over the last few months. To that end, all teachers will have pathways of professional learning, some of which are district provided. That would be learning around content and on-demand support and professional development. They'll also have support that's school provided, taking place in PLC meetings, which are cherished times at the school level to be able to collaborate with colleagues, coaching, and observation and feedback from administrators. We're prepared to be able to deliver this adult learning in various settings and in various modalities, again, particularly in light of ambiguity around what schooling and learning may look like as we venture into 2020, 2021.
Thank you, Beth. And just to try to close us out here this evening, just to remind us what matters most is that our commitment to providing high quality, standards aligned resources and equitable instructional practices is a key lever that has been proven to positively impact all students. We know that we have to continue to go deeper and not wider to ensure that our best instruction is our core instruction for EC, TD, EL, and magnet areas. We also know that this has to continue to be investment in what matters most, which is our people, and developing their content expertise through several different key opportunities. One, as we continue to think about the implications of our third grade reading data, we really want to ensure that our investment in resources is equally matched, if not more, in high quality professional development that is centered on the science of reading, to ensure that we are helping our teachers and our school leaders understand how students learn to read and have really deep professional learning master's level courses in reading institutes that are also going to be available to our reading ecosystem that exists outside of our school system, because we show huge gratitude to our other partners, both in the nonprofit sector and faith-based sector, to ensure that we're continuing to provide the coherence as a community around how we teach our children to develop these key literacy skills. We also understand that some of our schools need more support than others, especially those that may be underperforming. And so we are committed to continuing providing additional augmented support for schools that are requesting and or in need of additional help with implementation of our new high quality curriculum. And as Beth alluded to earlier, it's really incredibly important that we are good stewards of our financial resources. Because of those movements that Beth had talked about, where we had an opportunity to build a bench in our internal capacity of those that can now provision professional learning, so we can move away from an over-reliance on some external contracts. It helps us put more money back into the school where it matters most. One key area is continuing to provision additional financial supports to our middle schools, where we found through the course of this year, while they were implementing both in English language arts and in mathematics, very few of our middle schools had the opportunity to have any instructional support beyond what they were experiencing in the classroom. And as we know, our students and our teachers all improve as a result of instructional coaching. We are committed to reimagining the way that we provision professional development to our teachers, not just in smaller groups, but in opportunities by hearing them really clearly. They do not want to be torn by moving away from their students in order to receive high quality professional development. I'm proud to say in the year ahead, they will receive up to 8 days of professional development using our teacher planning days that will be direct to all of our multiple stakeholders outlined in our district's theory of action. And one component of that will be our reading institutes that I referenced on the previous slide. In addition to those types of supports that will be available directly through professional development, these additional staff members will also be able to provision direct service delivery opportunities that are just-in-time coaching opportunities when we recognize specific schools in each of our learning communities need additional supports or opportunities for deeper learning as we continue to calibrate around specific core actions in math and in language arts. The learning as a result of this pandemic, as well as prior to the pandemic, as a result of the deep investments that this board and previous boards have made around our technology infrastructure, and personalized learning, we continue to be poised to offer these types of supports in various modalities moving forward. We will continue to provision remote learning opportunities through the end of this year, as well as through the course of the entire summer. We are deeply positioned with talent, the resources, and the vision to reimagine education across Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools as a result of this pandemic, recognizing that what matters most in our key strategy must exist, whether we are in a brick and mortar model of instruction and learning, as well as a remote learning opportunity. So we will continue to support the delivery of grade level teaching as well as high quality core instruction. And we will do that in partnership with our families and our partners throughout the course of the summer as we look forward to a very successful start to the 2020-2021 school year. As our superintendent eloquently alluded to earlier, we are exploring various models of school to address these unknown factors, but we also know that we are going to need to be prepared to provision and support the deep academic interventions and socially emotional supports that will be needed both prior to the pandemic and as a result of it. There's a lot to celebrate amongst the learning and teaching team in this district, and I'm incredibly proud to be a champion and an ambassador for this amazing team. What most districts spend decades trying to prepare, nationally, our district has been recognized over the course of the last few weeks for pulling off an incredible pivot on a dime response as a result of this pandemic in just under a week. And that's a result of having incredible partners, strong governance, great leadership on behalf of our superintendent and our deputy superintendent. And again, I'm grateful for all of the teachers and the school leaders in the field who work tirelessly around the clock to make this happen. They are beginning to reach out to us each and every day. This is one accolade that recently came from a teacher at Providence High School, that as a result of us curating these resources, being responsive to the feedback that you heard called out on the headlines from our TNTP report 2 years ago, when they had a really difficult time exploring resources, not knowing where anything lived and existed. We have solved for that as a result of putting their needs first, because when our teachers have what they need, they can provision what the need for our students. And so we're incredibly grateful for their continued partnership and their voice. I'm proud to be a part of this district, and because what matters then still matters today. And that's ensuring that all of our students, not just some of our students, succeed, achieve, thrive while they're with us and post-graduation. And I would love the opportunity to entertain any of the questions that you may have regarding our district strategy at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Superintendent, do you have anything more to add before I turn to board members for questions?
I do not, Madam Chair.
All right. I'm sure we have some questions, feedback, insights, thoughts. A lot to absorb here. Ms. Sawyer.
I want to thank the team for the presentation. I think it charts a course that responds to the deep need in the community to make sure that we educate all the children in our district, and having a uniform approach to curriculum and professional development across schools, I think is a important step toward equity. I know our partners at the County Commission are looking to hear how we plan to address inequities in our school system. And I think this is one major step to address those historic inequities. And if you have any other thoughts on how specifically your plan addresses those inequities, I'd love to hear you talk about that.
I would say one of the cornerstones of our district's equity strategy, not just our learning and teaching strategy, is great teaching. That if we want children, all of our children, to have opportunities post-graduation, that really centering their daily experience with the very best teachers who have all of the resources that they need is going to be incredibly important. But we've also wanted to close, we've also asked that we ensure that our beliefs and our mindsets about what children can do, that we continue to address and have those very difficult mirror type conversations, not just to ourselves, but with each other, to ensure that our students are accessing the most rigorous coursework that's available in the district.
I know as you talk about the importance of strong instruction in every classroom, where are we in terms of having strong teachers in the schools that have the most challenged populations?
I would say, and my observation, being a part of this great school system for 2 years, is that some of our strongest teachers are working with some of our most struggling students in a lot of our schools. The opportunity to provision these resources is creating a floor for excellence for those teachers, not a ceiling, and an opportunity, but provisioning this type of professional development alongside of it, as well as the different types of supports that will be a direct service delivery model to our schools, is something that they have been calling for. And under Dr. Hayes' leadership, I think we are positioning ourselves to have the coherent strategy to answer all of those different fronts that are important that the various schools that we represent have been requesting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Byers-Bailey?
Thank you. When I was listening to the presentation and all the plans and the foresight and the detail that had gone into putting together the program for the year, I was thrilled with what I was going to anticipate the outcome would be at the end of the year. And then we got hit with the virus. And at first I was thinking all of that was going to go down the tubes, because our most challenged students were the ones who were in the lagging in just getting on board with the technology and with the trying to learn at home and all the other challenges that came along with parents who weren't prepared to work with the students at home. And I'm really thrilled with the professional development that the teachers got, but I'm hard pressed to think that at the end of this year, the students got the benefit of all of that.
I share your concerns, but I also think there's a blessing in this, that the fact that we've had a year under our belt to deepen our teachers' ability to know what this curriculum entails, to refine their craft and their ability to implement it successfully with their teachers, both remotely, because instruction didn't stop on March 13th. We continue to provision high quality learning opportunities, and we continue to do that today. And I know we're all incredibly proud of that. And Jonna is one of our 5th grade teachers on the line who's a testament to that, how that plays out. But I would also say in closing, Thelma, and Ms. Byers-Bailey, excuse me, is that we also have to ensure that our expectations upon our return is not necessarily 9 weeks of remediation. This is an opportunity for us to hold steadfast in our commitment to grade level instruction, while also simultaneously provisioning the interventions and resources that are going to be needed to meet everybody where they're at. And I think our strategy was growing fruit and still is, even when we're in a remote learning environment. And I know that our kids are going to be responsive to that, regardless of whatever model of schooling becomes before us in the fall.
I hope so too.
I see simultaneously, I see Mr. Strain and Ms. De La Hara. So I'll go to my left, Mr. Strain first, and then to Ms. De La Hara.
Thank you, Ms. Dashu, and thank you to the team for putting together this tremendous presentation. Appreciate all the work you've done. Cannot say enough about the pivot that you all made in March to remote and virtual learnings in classrooms. And as you all know, I've got 4 in the house here who are receiving that instruction. And it's been difficult on them. It's been difficult on our parents, as I speak, obviously as one of them, and many of you as as one as well. And of course on our teachers, our staff, et cetera. But you all have done a phenomenal job in that pivot, and I can't thank you enough. One of the things, Mr. Kingsley, that you just mentioned, you just talked about meeting kids where they are. That for me is the definition of equity, recognizing where kids are and what they need to fly as high as they possibly can. And in terms of the equitable instruction, ensuring that we are, you're building this scaffolding. We talk about building up, raising the floor and continuing to meet our students where they are in every subject, regardless of who they are, where they are in their educational journey, and ensuring every day that we are challenging them to fly as high as they possibly can. And I just want to lift that up here, because I know we have a lot of conversation about the standards that we're raising, and that's critical. But we do have to make sure that as we look toward differentiated instruction, personalized learning, that we're recognizing every student has a need, and that we're meeting them, as you said, where they are, and providing them that opportunity every day to fly as high as they can. I appreciate it.
Well said. Thank you.
Ms. De La Hora.
Yes, thank you. I also want to go what you're saying about the transition to remote virtual learning. A lot of families, parents have different feedback and thoughts about it. It has been difficult for many, but I am very proud and often do tell them what a great feat this has been. And even though I don't have, the pulse on it on a day-to-day basis, I know what it takes in the background to make all that happen. So I just want to start off by echoing what Mr. Strain said and congratulating that, because it's truly been amazing that we've been able to move to that platform. I also just want to say that I'm very excited about the expansion of the curriculum and your presentation tonight, Mr. Kingsley. And I guess the only question that I have, and it hit me as you were talking, I think I asked you a similar question the very first night that we met before I was even elected on the board. So I'll bring it back up just because it's obviously very important to me. It stays on the top of my head. But when we're talking about our curriculum and the professional development, which by the way, I'm very excited about the changes and the way we're structuring the professional development coming into this next year. And as our teachers are evaluating where they are thinking about unconscious bias and those type of cultural competencies, can you address how specifically during the professional development that those type of issues might be addressed? And is there an opportunity, for example, for a teacher? I know my 6th grade daughter with her new ELL curriculum this year had a story that they were reading about the Native American boarding schools that many of our Native Americans were forced to attend. If they found themselves in a situation where the teacher just went, wow, I don't really know much about the history surrounding that and how that came to be, could they reach out specifically, and to whom would they reach out, even after the professional development that happens at the beginning of the year, but just in an ongoing basis, if they have a realization that they need more information, guidance about a particular topic, how would they do that at a practical level?
I think there's no better resource than that of the school as a place to start in supporting and reaching out and communicating with the highly effective school principals that we have. But we're a community of resources that are available to our schools. And so when we have opportunities to provision and think about the different opportunities for families to get plugged in and engaged, we have family and community engagement opportunities, both in our federal programs office, as well as in other offices in our district. And I'm happy to work in partnership alongside Beth and Matt and everybody else in partnership to ensure people are continuing to educate themselves on what's available and what is our district approach in that space. It's a process that's really important, and we have a firm commitment to doing it because we're being really honest where we're not necessarily serving all students well, and recognize that there are infrastructures that keep on allowing that to maintain itself. And so as a result of us talking about that and seeing how that shows up through high quality resources, who has access to them, who does not, who has access to interventions, who does not, where are we exhibiting where we're leaning in or leaning out. And those are types of things that our school leaders have been incredibly brave and assertive in learning more about. And these will opportunities that we continue to go deeper and not have that be something that's separate, but integrated in terms of how learning and teaching shows up in our classrooms.
Thank you.
Ms. Ship. You're muted.
Thank you. I wanted to say to the team for what you've done, being an instructional leader at a school. I know how important this work is, and to make sure everybody is on point, some uniformity, consistency, and curriculum and instruction. This has been a bold, great move. And so I'm pleased to see that. I'm also the liaison to the Equity Committee, and I was recently in an equity meeting virtually. And I think one of the things is the concern is what happens now that we have had remote learning? How do we move that gauge for students who didn't quite get what they needed as we go back into possibly, you know, the classroom? What will that look like? And so I do think people are very concerned about this sense of equity in terms of remote learning. And we know kids learn differently. I do want to say that the teachers have been very positive about their work. I've had a chance to hear from them. They're very thankful for all of the resources, as you mentioned, Mr. Kingsley, that they've received. They felt really good about the instruction they had. I think the question is keeping kids focused in this time and making sure they get to the end, still getting the work done. So I know there's been some lapses there. And so what will that look like? And how much time will we give to that as we go back into the classroom? And that's going to be important as we look at, you know, the equity issue.
That was a big question, Ms. Ship.
Yeah. Well, and sorry, Brian, but Ms. Ship, the first thing I'll let you know is that at the closure of this year, one thing that's happening in all of our elementary and middle school classrooms is that our teachers are taking kind of an assessment of where students are ending up in the years by standard. That will be sent out to the parents, but it will also be placed in all the CUME folders. So all of our principals will be able to use that document to then know how to place students, aligning their needs to the strengths of the teachers. Also, I will say that unfortunately, we know that many families have been hard hit during this time of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we want to make sure that if we have a student that has to change locations of the county from one school to another, that CUME folder follows that student, which would then follow with that information with it to make sure that when they're received by the new school, they're able to appropriately place that student and make sure that they're closing those gaps that are existing as they close out this year.
Thank you.
Mr. Schul.
I had a few questions about the curriculum specifically. And I think the biggest conclusion that we can get from that report that was released a few years ago was that what really makes or breaks kids' educations is access to grade level education, which is rigorous and pushes them to the extent that needs to be done. And I think it also, I'm glad that we're confronting the fact that that's specifically lacking in disadvantaged minority groups in CMS. So then my question would be, specifically when we're looking at like the new curriculum that we seem to be innovating from K through 3 in middle schools, how is that curriculum reflective of a higher baseline for kids to achieve grade level education?
When you say higher baseline, are you talking about students that may not be underperforming?
Right. So like if students are not at the current grade level, how is the new curriculum ensuring that they get there?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, what I would say is the quality review that we did internally in our school system 2 years ago, where we visited 185 teachers in 25 different schools. The inequitable access to high quality curriculum did not just exist with our students of color. They existed across our entire system. It did not, it existed everywhere. And so those implications play out not just for our struggling students. The curriculum that we've invested in is not a curriculum for struggling students. It is a curriculum that reflects college and career ready standards that were not necessarily at the time being exhibited in all of our classrooms, which students on the high end of our spectrum in terms of high achievement weren't able to benefit from, as well as the students who were struggling and continue to struggle in some instances as well. So I think that's important to note. But curriculum, as I shared, and I'll close on this, Gabe, for this particular question, because you always ask a couple thoughtful questions. I know I'm sure you have another one, is that this is an opportunity to see it as a floor, not a ceiling. And so really provisioning TD supports for our talented development, high achieving students that extend beyond the classroom, beyond with the knowledge building and the types of themes and topics that are centered on our curriculum. Our district is working really hard to provision that for all of our schools. And I think that's another thing that makes EL education great as a partner, is that it's civic minded, action oriented. It puts children in scenarios where they can create. It's not about just provisioning and assignments and asking people, students across the school system, to complete worksheets. There's things that create people to collaborate and think critically and be independent and create presentations that are reflective of real relevant topics that are happening in our society today.
Okay, thank you. And then my next question was going to be about, again, relating a bit to the curriculum, that the idea that if teachers have higher expectations for students, then those students are then going to perform better as a result. So specifically, if we're looking at like high schools, I think the most clear manifestation I can think of that is the honors standard gap, where we specifically nominate some classes to be honors classes, therefore creating a bias for teachers to expect more of these students. And that's why we have an achievement gap between these honors and standard classes. So I was wondering, what kind of ideas are we pushing forward to try to close the honors standard gap in high schools?
I'll take a shot at it, and then Matt and Beth, please fill in some of the gaps. I know we have a couple opportunities to support that effort in our district. We're just looking at who actually has access to those honor courses across schools, and look at all of the various data points to reflect who has the potential in being there, and have we done our due diligence in placing it? And if not, why? What is that case? Like really getting into the mindsets and the biases and the habits that we have as systems that determine whether somebody has access to those content to those courses in which do not. We've created other opportunities where we have qualitative type data, not just some of our predetermined state balanced assessment type data that we may have that predicts and or determines whether a student may be eligible and or successful. We're looking for other types of attributes: grit, resilience, drive, perseverance, the desire. They may trying to identify trusted adults that are in our specific buildings to have mentorship for specific for specific students, to when they enter those particular courses, that they're continuing to be reinforced with additional supports upon entry. So like we're looking at various different modalities. It's not necessarily a one size fits all approach, but we have several high schools doing really creative things. And as a result, just in the last 2 years, the number of students across our district that have access to AP type level courses in our district has increased by the hundreds as a result of those efforts. But we have still a long way to continue to go in that space.
Okay, and then my last question was going to be specifically about the English language learner adaptation, because I noticed that right, our graduation rates for English language learners are relatively low compared to other subgroups. But I didn't know any specific strategies being implemented with this new sort of plan to try to address those inequities. So if anyone could elaborate on what those might look like.
So we have dual language schools. We have supports, English language learner supports that are funded by our federal dollars, that are additional supports direct to support teachers and students in our schools and in our community and outreach, by not just thinking about the types of supports that need to happen in our classroom, but creating an outreach that is successful, safe, and engaging for the entire family to be engaged into the school culture and the school climate. I think those are important things that we continue to double down on. When we think about how our English language learner profile or subgroup is determined, it depends also when they're entering into our system and into our country in terms of how that data point is described around graduation. So I think that's just an important caveat to note. That's not necessarily denoting somebody that speaks English or speak as a second language. That's an opportunity of also determining how long that they've been in our system. Beth, are there other types of supports in working with Naja and the team that we can highlight? Because I think it's a really important question. You have anything else that you may want to add to that?
Sure. I think a tangible shift in our adult learning this past year and continuing into the summer is having our English language learner department conducting adult learning and professional development opportunities in alignment with learning and teaching, so that as folks are learning how to use the curriculum, they're also learning at the very same time strategies that can be used with our English language learner students, and also our students with exceptionalities, our students who have who are receiving services for talent development, so that those aren't separate adult learning experiences that people have to experience in isolation, but that those are happening together in a more integrated format. And our principals and teachers have given us really good feedback when we've done that at high levels.
Okay, so sorry, could you elaborate a little bit more about what do you mean by like non-isolated? So how are they together? Maybe.
So a teacher is going to see or experience a classroom of students that may have very different learners with different needs within that classroom. However, oftentimes in adult learning scenarios, a teacher may go to one session or engage remotely in a session that's just designed for English language learners or just designed for students who have exceptionalities. What we've looked at doing most recently would be actually having sessions of adult learning for teachers that address how to implement the curriculum and then give strategies that work across those subgroups within the context of that adult learning experience, so that A, they're not having to go to multiple sessions, but B, it shows that learning shows up just as they are expected and needing to be able to provision instruction for students.
Okay, thank you.
Marshall. Mute. Mute.
Sorry about that. Wanted to talk about a couple things here. Today, our Board of County Commissioners was spending a lot of time talking about education and what we are doing to meet the needs of struggling students. And I think we've been hearing a lot about that. I think that it's really important to note right here that we've made some bold decisions and we are funding them within the monies that we have. And we are, as you said, building our bench and making that bench very accessible to our educators and our students. And we're not relying on outside folks who don't know our schools to do this. And I think that's huge. And I'm very, very proud of the work that you guys have done around that. So I want to acknowledge that. There is a lot of conversation nationally about the science of reading. And obviously reading is the most fundamental thing that we do, particularly with our students in K-3. And that's where I think people have the most heartburn, heartache. How are we moving the ball here? So there's a national debate about this. And I'd love to know how you all see this fitting into that debate, where you think we're hitting it correctly. And then I want somebody to be thinking about, while that somebody's answering that, I want you to give me a typical day in a second grader and how this curriculum influences that child's day versus the old curriculum. I really do spend some time about what you really want to see out of that second grader's day based on this new reading curriculum. So first, I want to talk about the science of reading and how this fits in, and then I want to see what a day looks like. I think that would be a great thing for our public to hear.
Sure. So I'm happy to start by talking and leading about the science of reading. The science of reading is rooted in a panel of experts, the National Reading Panel, that through deep research came up with key findings that are evidence-based around how students learn how to read. One of the key elements of that would be having daily systematic phonics instruction be taught to our students to develop their key foundational literacy skills. Prior to this curriculum investment, we did not have systemic phonics instruction happening in this district for quite some time. I would share that with you, that the implications of that, not just on our students in grades K through 2, but how that shows up in corresponding grade bands as they show up into middle school, high school, with key unfinished learning is something that we have to be really aggressive in addressing. Another key finding in the science of reading is that students make meaning of the world by building knowledge. Reading and developing literacy skills is an equalizer in terms of not necessarily relying upon all of our personal experiences to make meaning of the world, but through text, we should be developing knowledge around key themes and topics. So we're developing mental schema around how the world works, around key juicy vocabulary, as we begin to determine not only how we determine to make meaning of the world, but how we make meaning of ourselves living in it, right? And I think that's a key essential part of education, not just learning how to read, but learning who we are as people. Another component of that would be different than our previous approach to a framework called balanced literacy is that the science of reading believes that grade appropriate text needs to be at the center of daily ELA instruction each and every day. The primary approach to putting leveled readers in front of our children as their form of core instruction only allows children to maintain those levels and current gaps throughout their entire academic career. They never have access to the worthy, juicy, grade appropriate text where all of the key vocabulary and mental models and mental schema and images exist. And as a result of that, an unintended consequence is that inequities get amplified. And so those are key areas that are directly addressed in this curriculum, as well as integrating key topics in science and social studies through the center of our topics. I know you spoke about second graders, but if it's okay, I'm going to lift up fifth graders just for a second, because Jonna here is a fifth grade teacher and she needs to get excited about a fifth grade experience that her kids are going to have next year. But they're going to be learning about human rights. They're going to be learning about biodiversity in the rainforest, thinking about athletics and athletic leadership and what the role that they've played over time to create social change for their communities in their countries, thinking about the impact of natural disasters. I mean, think about the type of conversations, Jonna, that you can have with your particular students, not just with grade level text that is their own personal copy to bring home, to think about how to take close notes, but bring back into the classroom, but the types of things that you can draw upon other social studies, science, different resources in our own community to make that come alive for your students. I'm really excited for that. I know I pivoted away from your second grade question, Ms. Marshall, but I'm hopeful you kind of get the gist of how that plays out for our students in the year ahead.
And Brian, I was going to ask if Beth could just, for just 2 seconds, Beth, if you don't mind, just cover that second grade for us real quick. I'm an old high school guy, so I'm going to let you handle the second grader there. Yes, ma'am.
Sure. So for our kindergarten, first and second grade students, they're going to spend up to 3 hours on literacy a day, which doesn't look like sitting with a book and reading for 3 hours, although I personally would enjoy every minute of that. It's going to involve 3 different components. One is going to be what we call modules, where students are exposed to grade level text. And y'all, that's key, because in many cases in the past, we have said, hey, you as a student are a level blank, and all that student experiences is that level of reading. So as a second grade student, if I am deemed at a kindergarten level in reading, there was the chance that I never saw a second grade text. And we can't be surprised that a second grade student who's only seen a kindergarten text for the entire year or a first grade text would get to an end of grade test potentially and not be able to perform at grade level. It wasn't necessarily that they weren't being taught or that teachers weren't teaching their hearts out. It's that they were never getting to grade level. And when we talk about access, that's denying access. So instead, we've got scaffolds that are being built for our English language learners to assist students with vocabulary, to give them pictures, to give them various texts that represent different points of view, that develop community in the classroom, but also support students in being able to access that grade level text. Because it's never been a situation of students not being able to think or to build knowledge. It's been a situation of us being able to help them get those words off the page to do that work. That section is followed up with what we call skills block, and that's where every single child is going to get explicit instruction in phonics and then be able to, after that, receive whatever they need as a next step. As Jimmy Kim, who works with us, has been working with us around a MORE study for a good long while in Charlotte, talks about the fact that the science of early reading is fixed, it's finite, and it can be taught. And so therefore we teach it, but then we also make sure we know along the spectrum of letters and sounds what students know, what they don't know, and then what their next learning is. And once they've mastered that, how to be able to apply it in writing. So all of that happens within Skills Block. And then there's a third component, which is labs, which is where students get to practice their socio-emotional skills in the context of the knowledge that they've built, to be able to engage in problem-based learning around whatever it is that they've been reading about. So for example, our first graders were reading The Most Magnificent Thing, and part of their labs work was working collaboratively with other students around building their classroom most magnificent thing. And in touring classrooms, we got to see things like a little bin to be able to hold everybody's lunch boxes, because it's really messy when everybody brings their lunch boxes and they're all over a classroom. But those became their most magnificent things. So it's really a three-part approach to really building students' literacy skills.
Thank you. That sounds like a fun day. So I appreciate that.
Ms. Sawyer. Oh.
Mute.
You're muted.
Sorry. I had a couple of questions, kind of jogged my memory from Gabe's questions. One, regard to the EL performance, the performance of English language learners in graduation and whatnot. Just to clarify, the only students who are captured in that graduation number are students who are at the point of graduation classified as English language learners. Is that true? Or is it, if I was classified as an English language learner in second grade, and by fifth grade I was transitioned out of that program, am I counted in that graduation number or not?
I do not want to give you or anybody in the community inaccurate information to that very important question, but I am very happy to research that to come back and find out, because I think it's really important to answer that precisely.
Because there's a very big difference in, who is actually currently EL in 12th grade, which may have no relation to who was EL in second grade. Okay. The other question is about access, in middle school, and the honors versus standard question, middle and high school, the honors versus standard question that Gabe raised. In talking to board members at other districts, I know other districts have experimented and have started not offering a separate honors and standard classroom. And I can't remember if it was Durham, Orange, or Chapel Hill, Carborough, but somebody over there had eliminated that distinction, had taught those classes as honors classes. And after the first quarter, we're giving students the opportunity to shift to a standard level, but they remained in that honors classroom. Have we looked at that? Have you heard about that? Is that something that would be of interest?
Yes, ma'am. And I'll share with you that Dr. Ratley, Condor Ratley, who is one of our equity superintendents over high school, has been working with them continuously throughout the course of this year. We have several schools that are actually during their scheduling that I know about personally that are looking at doing that for beginning next school year. I think it's important for us to make sure that the dynamics of how they structure those courses, how they provide those supports for those students is all considered in the master schedule when that's being created. So once we are able to see, and we have several different pieces that are happening in many of our high schools, and what we're going to be able to do after the conclusion of next year is be able to pull those specific things out and begin to replicate those into other high schools. Once we know that, because it's not just as simple as we can place students in classes all day long. We can change the title of the course all day long, but if we don't have the right teacher in there that's ready to lift students up, close those gaps, and really get them excited about learning, we're just placing them in a class. So there's some key components to that that we're working on at this time, but that's a great lift up. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm excited to see more of that happening.
Yes, ma'am.
And Ms. Sawyer, the power of technology during these remote board meetings, I get access to some of the answers to your questions more rapidly. And so the data on the graduation slide, those that I've identified EL, English language learners, are students that are identified as English language learners during that time of graduation.
Which would speak to the rather sad graduation rate. But if we're looking at students who may have arrived speaking no English the year before graduation, that is that's a heavy lift.
No doubt.
Yes, ma'am. And we'll also include that also as part of Dr. Barnes's presentation with accountability in the 2 sessions from now when he presents to you guys as well. So that will be included in his as well. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Byers-Bailey?
I just want to follow up on what Board Member Sawyer was talking about with students showing up in high school as EL. I had occasion to talk to a couple of my high school principals in Title I schools, and they said one of the problems they have is not only do they show up in high school with no English, some of them show up in high school never having had any formal education whatsoever. So they not only don't know English, they don't even really understand Spanish other than the Spanish that they spoke in the street. And then the high school is stuck with a student who's EL, has no comprehension of the English, and they're going to graduate in a couple of years. They're going to age out. And they're trying to educate them and from that level to bring them up. So that's one of the concerns that I had expressed to me from a couple of my high school principals.
There's certainly challenges, but what makes our school system and public education great is that we get to serve everybody that walks through our doors. And I know that's what makes this team wonderful, is that we do that with open hearts and open minds. We know it's challenging and complex, but we got great people that are trying to do everything they can in partnership with those families in our community.
And
Ms. Sawyer?
I just want to lift up places where EL students have been embraced in our district. And I looked at the Geringer Focus program, which when I visited had students from all over the world, students who had lived in refugee camps, who had not had access to formal education, but were being immersed in a very rich curriculum and receiving as much support as we could offer. So I think it's incumbent on us to welcome these students from wherever they come from, but it does require some special supports, and I'm pleased that we can offer that at Geringer Focus.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, I wrote down a note when you were talking about how important it is. I think it was you, Dr. Kingsley, talking about how important it is to have a coherent, thoughtful strategy to really serve children in the way that we need to be serving them. And I think we've had the last, year or two is we've been putting all those pieces together, and we're on a good path. And I just want to speak to how important it is that we get this right, because the numbers are brutal. And that doesn't sit well with any of us. And I think that you have a very intentional, thoughtful strategy here. And I hope that we can see it through. I know a lot of public schools, not just CMS, but we have a tendency to chase trends. And we can't just this is not window dressing, this is deep systemic work. And we can't afford to back away from that hard systemic work. And so I'm glad that we're on this path. yeah, we can't be distracted by politics. We just have to continue to do the right thing for the children that we serve, especially the children who come to us with a lot more needs than some of the other children. So good work. And none of this is easy, especially in a pandemic. I know that with the upheaval of the pandemic, that may bring up some new opportunities, but for the most part, it's going to bring our children back to school with a lot more challenges that we're going to need to meet, and with a greater gap between some students who've, been able to kind of thrive at home, and some students who really have not been able to during the time of learning from home. So I want to point that out too. And we really have to work together with one another and with our partners in the county and in the state to serve these children in a very real and intentional, long-term, thoughtful way. So thank you for your report. So much more work to do. It's never good enough, but appreciate all the heart and all the brain power that you and your team have poured into this.
Thank you for all of you for your leadership and support. It means a lot. Thank you.
All right. If there is nothing else, then I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion from Ms. Byers Bailey,
Second.
a second from Ms. De La Hara. A close tie there.
Yeah, that's okay.
All in favor, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much, everybody. We're adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Thank you. Thank everybody.
Thanks, everyone.